Here's a question I have that I know a lot of, I'll just say, I think a lot of white people have. I get assumed all the time that I'm bigoted, that I'm racist, that I don't fucking care about you, about anybody. I mean, the George Floyd thing, like, fucking Stevie Wonder could watch that video and say, that's fucked up. When I watched that guy put his knee on the guy's neck, to having not known either one of them, having not seen any other aspect of it than just that taking place, and say, that cop is racist. How do you know he's racist?
I think what America has come to, it's true petty nature of, well, I'm just gonna do this because it's gonna, piss people off. I think that's one of the reasons why, Trump did get elected by the Electoral College, was because, he has that I don't give a fuck attitude.
I've been in those meetings where, an executive says, black doesn't sell. Maybe you could potentially do another story. And if there was no police officers, like, I'm left to my own devices. There is no, I'm going to maim you. There is, I'm going to kill you.
I can tell you nobody, and I mean fucking nobody, gives a shit what I think.
Putting statistics aside, it's just hundreds of years of this. Mm-hmm. And when is it going to end?
Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guests to the podcast. Both of these gentlemen have been on here before. They need no introduction, but they're going to get one anyway. These are the two gentlemen that give me the ability to say, some of my best friends are black, which everybody's favorite quote, right? Welcome to the stage, Remy Adeleke and Nick Irving.
What's up?
What's going on, man?
I'd like to take a quick second to shout out and thank our sponsor for today's podcast, Origin Labs and Jocko Fuel. Jocko Fuel is a great product. He's got a ton of different products, actually, within the Jocko Fuel line. That are phenomenal. The guests and I, enjoy them on the show. I do outside. I take a lot of the supplements. I've got some of the Origin Labs jeans, boots. They make skis. Just a really good, company that's all about American industry, and they do a fantastic job, really kind of revolutionizing American industry. From start to finish, all American made, all American sourced. Everything start to finish is all made right there in-house, and they do a phenomenal job at creating the products and fulfilling in the whole ball of wax. They've been a consummate supporter of the Mic Drop podcast for a long time now, and I can't thank Jocko Fuel and Origin Labs enough for the job that they do for us. So thank you to you guys.
I'd also like to say thank you to our other sponsor, Resilience Premium CBD. Resilience is excited to offer all Mic Drop listeners a 20% off discount on all products for 2 weeks from when this podcast is live, using the discount code MicDrop at checkout. I'd also like to say that Resilience, a great company that works in conjunction with Tricos CBD, and all military veterans and first responders receive 35% off, and that's always through the Military and First Responders program. You just have to sign up to get verified at resilientcbd.com/military and first responder discount. In terms of about Resilience, it's a premium CBD that I use. Again, it's works in conjunction with the Tricos brand. For the everyday athlete. It's www.resilientcbd.com. And Resilience was born when its founders, who are U.S. military veterans as well, personally experienced the effects and impact that CBD had on their own mental and physical obstacles. Focus was sharper, mental stress was calmed, fitness stamina was increased, and their bodies felt less pain and inflammation after super intense workouts. A lot of times, most times, people are able to either wean off entirely or significantly reduce pain management therapy. And this shared vision among the founders was that this incredible supplement had not only changed their life, but had the power to provide unbelievable benefits to family, friends, athletes, fellow veterans, and ultimately the entire fitness community. So big shout out to Resilience for their product, as well as, again, the Trico stuff, and we appreciate their support.
So, Nick, I appreciate, just for the listener, this was a long time coming with all of the kind of recent hot button issues going on in the media and around our country. I felt both with these two gentlemen and myself to really come together and talk about a lot of the issues that our society faces and try to get kind of a mutual perspective on it and get multiple perspectives on it. Nick was on his way here, got into an accident, and was kind enough to still manage to figure out a way to Skype in. So he's on Skype. Remy is sitting right across the desk from me, flew in from San Diego. I really cannot thank you guys enough for taking time out of your schedules. I know you guys are both busy as shit, but obviously it's an important topic that you guys have been pretty active on social media, as have a lot of folks. And I know the listeners are always craving that type of raw perspective that they just frankly don't get anywhere else. So thank you, gents, for both coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So first and foremost, you guys have both been on already, both favorite guests of the listeners. I'm going to skip most of the normal stuff that I do and get right into kind of why you guys are here and why we felt the need to offer something like this. How are both of you guys doing with what is going on right now as it relates in America?
Remy, you want to go first?
I'll let you jump in, Nick.
Okay, I'll get it. Dude, I think it's one of those things that may have been a lot of dirt, decades and decades and generations worth of dirt that's been swept under a rug, and now that boulder has finally formed, and it's come to that point where everybody kind of has to look at that boulder and address it and figure out, how are we going to break this thing up and get rid of it. If you can get rid of it, you can't put the rug back over it anymore. And I think that, at least having that that big boulder of whatever it may be, discrimination, racism, it's a good topic. I think that America does need. I don't think that topic has ever really been addressed. And from, my generation, my parents' generation, it's I'm going to say it's been a long time coming, but it kind of has, that America, can finally have this open, discussion and platform to finally be able to discuss issues that, have affected a certain demographic in a negative way.
Yeah. And kind of just to kind of echo, what Nick said, the good thing about it, because, my personality is I'm always trying to find the gift in the curse, right? Like this, what happened to George Floyd, what happened to Ahmaud Arbery and others have been horrific. And, so it's so often to find like, okay, what's the good, what's the good that can come out of this? And for me, it's conversation, One thing that I've been trying to say to people a lot, especially on social media and as I go on these different outlets is, the only way that we can have true unity is through conversation and understanding, right? You can't have unity without understanding, mutual understanding. That doesn't mean that we're going to agree and everybody's going to agree. That just means that, that's going to give us a level of understanding that's going to potentially lead to unity, right? Yeah. And so I think that the blessing in all of this, there's a whole lot of conversation that's happening. And then at the same time, there's a whole lot of things being exposed and uprooted and being brought to the surface. And there's a lot of people on social media and a lot of friends, especially, as it relates to some of the friends that I have, where I'm really kind of seeing I'm seeing true colors, so to speak, right? I'm seeing some people who are just like, especially people who follow Nick, people who follow me, we served in the military. So I think we have a large group of people who are, super patriotic, and super, hey man, thank you for your service, right? But I found that a lot of those people who follow, speaking for myself specifically, like, they haven't been too happy with the way things have transpired. And I know for me, with some of the things that I've said, so I've gotten pushback like, why are you talking about race? Like, why don't you talk about black on black crime? Why don't you talk about this? And it's just like, wow, dude, like, so it was all good when I was talking about, I went on this op, or it was all good when I talked about, family and life in America, when I shared my story. But now it's not all good when I talk about, what I recognize as racism, and part of it is systemic racism, right? So it's really exposing a lot. But then on the flip side, I'm getting a lot of people who are also like, man, I didn't see things that way, but I'm glad that you're speaking out, because now I'm able to see things in a different light. So again, two things is bringing understanding, which is the only way we're going to get to unity. And, the second thing is, it's really bringing to the surface, like, who's who and where they stand as it relates to certain topics.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think, when I look at, you talk about having conversations and how you really move forward, and it being from a unity standpoint really the only way that happens. I think it's important, and to from my perspective, to expound on it, is that I've had a unique position to be able to have some pretty raw conversations with people on things that are hard to talk about, and that most people don't share what they truly think, and kind of the benchmark, I think, of what allows that healing, that unity, et cetera, is we'll take a discussion such as this one, for example, is that, my level of respect for both of you guys, is as high as it is for anybody right out of the gate, which I think is an important distinction to start with, because if a lot of times what you see is, one group of people and another group of people, or even an individual, on media outlets where they're, arguing back and forth, they don't respect each other to begin with.
Yeah.
And when you couple that with going into the discussion with two main things, which is, number one, is the ability to listen, to understand, and not just respond. But then the second thing is also going into a conversation with the prospect that you may be fucking wrong.
Yeah.
Or at a minimum is that you go in there willing to have your mind changed, and not just go into the conversation saying, all right, here's all my points, here's what I'm going to bring up, and here's how I'm going to convince the other side of et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's the biggest problem that plagues most of these discussions, is there's a lack of both of those things. And so my goal with today's conversation is to, I would love to hear, a lot of the perspectives that you guys have that clearly I don't have. But I also think it's important for you guys to hear a perspective from a guy like me that you guys don't have. Yeah. And I think that, where a lot of the frustration, from the masses of people who don't say things, or, they're silent on social media, or maybe even the, some of the pushback that you guys get, that you're like, fuck, wait a minute. To me, I think, again, it's every bit as important for any of them, for me, for anyone, to really try to understand where you guys are coming from. But I also think there's productivity and a realness in saying, let me understand, why this guy is the way he is. Because like you said, I was good enough on an op, but not now. It's like, to me, I don't know who you're referring to, but I suspect, and I know for me personally, like anybody that I've been to war with, that I trust with my fucking life, like I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt of saying, well, there's for some reason, there's got to be a reason he thinks the way that he is. Let's try to figure out why that is.
And let me clarify, when I said posting pictures about, I'm not necessarily talking about people in the military.
Sure.
I'm talking about people who follow me, like kids or other groups who follow me, and they see me post me and my kit getting ready to go on an op.
Oh,
that's fine. I'm not speaking specifically to.
Yeah.
But I've had people in the military, and some people who have served with, who sent me emails, who sent me direct messages, and they're just like, what are you doing?
Sure.
So.
Yeah. So I think, for me, it's important to mention that as kind of, that's the pretext for having the conversation is, and even if I have to remind myself, if anybody having these conversations has to remind themselves, like, hey, it's, if I don't understand where they're coming from, this is never going to work. But it works for every perspective. If any one perspective has their heels in the sand and saying, I don't give a fuck what this other person thinks, I'm pissed and this is what's what, then it's impossible to have that quote unquote honest conversation that people always say that they want to have, but then they're not honest about it. Because for me, I can tell you, again, from we'll call it the other side, if that's how you want to present it, is that, when things are assumed about anybody, that's when problems start, right? And that's on if I assume something about you, you're going to get defensive. If you assume something about me, I'm going to get defensive. So, to me, assumption is, kind of the mother of all defensive fuck ups when it comes to arguments and debates and conversations and things of that nature. So, with that in mind, another question I guess I would pose is that with everything that you see that's going on, like how do you think it's going on? To expound on it's uncovering things, is that with all the different pockets of different movements in different cities and whatever, what do you see as happening above and beyond kind of the broad brushstroke of things are being uncovered? What more can you kind of reveal about what you see happening?
Well, I mean, one thing that I see that's really beautiful is we're seeing so often it's been, and this goes back to the 60s, but the majority of the people who have protested and spoke out have been African American, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the beautiful thing that we're seeing now is we're seeing other groups come to the table. We're seeing, blacks, we're seeing whites, we're seeing Asian people, we're seeing Hispanic people, we're seeing people in Germany, people in France, people in Australia, all around the world coming together and recognizing, this is a problem. There is something here, and let's get behind it. And I think that that's a beautiful thing, the fact that we're seeing other people come together behind it. So that's the first thing that I'm seeing. The second thing I'm seeing, I think Nick already kind of touched on this, is I think the government in general, and I'm speaking for the entire government, right? I think that the government, city officials and political leaders are seeing that, okay, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. Mm-hmm. There is no turning back. There's no turning back. And I think that what we're seeing is people saying, okay, we're going to make some decisions to hopefully ensure that this does not happen again. Mm-hmm. Whereas I didn't see that before with Ahmaud Arbery. I didn't see that before with Attila Jefferson. I didn't see that before with others. So I think that, another thing I'm seeing is people are making, now there's some decisions that are being made. Like I don't agree with defunding the police. That's something I personally don't agree with, because who are you going to call? Now, I don't understand the whole science behind it, so I don't know what that's going to fully entail. So I can't speak to it, but let's just say that the outcome is that the police are going to have no resources, right? Mm-hmm. Financially, the police are not going to be able to do their job. Who's going to ensure law and order for the most part? Is that going to just be so? There are decisions being made, which is good. I just think that we need to be wise about those decisions. So those are the two things that I'm seeing. Sorry, Nick.
No, dude, I'm 100% on board. I had a chance to go to these one of the protests out here in San Antonio, and dude, it was like you said, it was a big melting pot of every race. There were Hispanics for all the types of signs, Hispanics for blacks, Asians, and dude, it was everybody there, a big melting pot of every ethnicity, background, you name it, man. And it was different from the videos that I've seen or the stories that my parents talked about of just primarily black people protesting and wanting to stand up for rights, and the white people that would stand up with the black community would get beat and get the same punishment just as as the black community back then. So seeing that unity is a big, I guess, not even a game changer. It's a big one small step closer to hope, I guess. Having a community as a nation, all 50 states, different countries. I was talking to a guy in Scotland, and he's hearing about it and he wants to do something about it, and he sees an issue. And like Remy also said, the defunding of the police force, I'm not too sure what that all entails. I've been looking at the news a little bit and trying to figure it out, and I don't see the logic behind it. I think sometimes people just make they put certain ideas out there, or they speak without thinking too much into that thought process of, let's say, defunding the police. And what is step number 2? It's like chess, you know what I mean? You think 3 steps ahead, or 4 steps ahead, and the people who usually get stuck on that, I'm just going to make this move, they lose the game. So the defunding of the police, I would like to see what the end result is, because if, like Remy said, and we all know, without, dude, I've called the cops like plenty of times if I needed assistance, and I wouldn't know what to do. I would be scared if I left the law and order into my hands. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what, I would be scared if I had that power.
I agree. You hit on the point I was just about to make. With the type of people that we are, and the type of backgrounds that we have, for some other people, we need to call the police to do them a favor, right? Like that is the grace that we are extending. So and an example to that, I have an ADT security system in my house, right? There's been times when the alarm has tripped. Now it wasn't a legitimate trip where somebody was breaking in, but the first thing that I did was I went to my closet, I grabbed my gun, I got some of my kit, and I patrolled through my house to inspect to see what was going on. Now, and my wife is like, Remy, call 911. Remy, call 911. And I say, babe, you call 911. I'm going to deal with this the best I can. But the point what I'm trying to make is that if my wife didn't call 911, or if 911 wasn't alerted, and if there was no police officers, like, I'm left to my own devices. There is no, I'm going to maim you. There is, I'm going to kill you, right? And so, I think especially for people like us, the police is a great buffer, so when so we defund them, what you're going to have is a lot of guys like me and you having to take the law into our own hands. And we don't want to do that. Like, we want to, we want to live normal lives and let the police do their job. So
yeah, I can rest assured. I mean, I'm in that same boat. Is that there's a small sliver of, hey, defund the police. It's almost like you go ahead and do that. Almost like. Yeah. However, to me, in the grand scope of things, I mean, my take is, I try to look at every situation as, what does the Constitution say, basically, which is. To me, if a certain city says, we think we should defund the police, and we've voted, and the majority in city council, in conjunction with the mayor, the population, whatever system they have in place to enact legislation, gets voted in, the way that it's supposed to, and they say we're going to shit can the police, go for it. Yeah. That it's that city's prerogative to run it how they want. The one kind of catch is that. And I would call it maybe a check and balance, is that there's an element of the 10th Amendment that says that the state's responsibility of safety of its own people rests on the shoulders of the actual state. So in an instance, you'll use Minneapolis, since that's the 9 out of 12 vote that just happened to actually defund their police department. Is that in the event that the city just goes to complete shit and it's basically anarchy, is that at that point then the state can decide and override its own cities to say, you're not picking up security, we will, and that's where they'll use state police, National Guard for that state, whatever, to do what they have to restore some semblance of order. So to me, I think that it's almost a good thing in that. Kind of a careful what you wish for. And if one city, again, goes about it the way that they're supposed to and says this is what we want to do, then to me, I think constitutionally you have to let them try that.
That's true.
I disagree with it as much as anybody. I think it'd be pure chaos, especially, it's one thing for guys like us to say, fucking bring it. I'll defend what I have to, but, kids, elderly, women, single moms, like you're putting a lot of fucking people in a really bad spot that just don't have the ability to do what we do in our houses and things of that nature. And so to me, you're kind of letting the fox in the hen house, so to speak, by saying, hey, you know what, we're going to have, community organizers that patrol around and talk to people about their feelings and air their grievances, and that's going to do it. I mean, you guys, and I think we collectively know better than most that there is some real goddamn evil that exists in the world that you're not going to negotiate with, that they're going to take advantage of a situation when they can, and they will. But so that, that to me, I think we're all on the same page as far as that goes. I am curious, from the aesthetics of how it's viewed in terms of, we'll call it the movement, which is impossible to argue that it's nationwide. It's in about every city, this one included, where to me there's kind of a disparity between what the message is and what's taking place. And I'm curious, Nick, I haven't been to any protests or rallies or any riots either. I have stayed away on purpose because I have no desire to get in a position where now I have to defend myself or my family or whatever. But I am curious from that standpoint, what was your impression from leaving there in terms of the disparity between an actual protest of trying to convey a message versus people taking advantage of an opportunity to do harmful things?
Dude, it was 100%. I would say I went there in the evening time, let's say 2:00 in the evening, and I stayed all the way till almost maybe 10 o'clock at night. Throughout the entire daytime, dude, it was 100%. Like, I could take my family out there where I was in San Antonio. I could have taken my family out there. There's marches and stuff like that. The police force really didn't bother anyone. They were aiding, helping people, protest or whatnot. It wasn't until nightfall that downtown they have like gangs and stuff. So you had, MS-13, you had
I think we lost a little bit of audio. I'm sure we'll pick back up here in a second.
Yeah, and then we can pick up where you left off.
Can you still hear us, Nick? All right, well,
I still hear you guys.
okay.
You cut off at MS-13.
Yeah, so there's MS-13.
Yeah. It was like MS-13 and Bloods and stuff like that, gang members that were coming out, and they were the ones that threw the water bottles at the cops, and they started to spray paint like everything, destroy everything. They would just walk past a artifact or something and just destroy it, kick it over. Most of the guys, the protesters from the beginning, left by that point, and the ones that did remain were like trying to stop the just weird chaos. There was no point behind it. It was just breaking random stuff and creating a path to destruction. And I think all that did, my impression after leaving, I almost forgot about all the stuff that happened, the peaceful portion of it. And it was just that chaotic moment of, tear gas and rubber bullets or whatever they were shooting out there, pepper balls. And, dude, it's just, it 100% takes away from the message and, if not dilutes the hell out of it. You know what I mean? And I think the original message is, I want to say it's more towards, the overreach, the overpower, the, dude, I grew up in the city, so I have a different perspective of, the cops that worked in the area I grew up in. And I've, seen some of my friends get roughed up for no reason and, beat up or taken to the back of a car and questioned for no reason. Or, I've been in those situations. I've never been beat by a cop, but, I've been just randomly searched and questioned and stuff like that because I fit a description or my tail light was out that was never out. I get the message when it comes to that, the oppression of a certain people or how they feel, how we feel oppressed, and systematically it's designed that way. You look at the way cops were, designed to begin with. They were, originally slave catchers back in the day. So I think there's a heavy root behind this, racism or the racist aspect of the police force somewhere deep down in its roots. I mean, especially guys who, come from that era. They pass down that knowledge and that, ideology of these certain people in this area are predators. And, you're a predator, too. You have to go out there and do what predators do. But to say all cops are bad, I will never get on that board. I don't think that was the message to begin with. One of my uncles is a cop and stuff like that, black guy, and he's the nicest guy I know. I don't think he's ever pulled a gun on anybody, but I don't have an issue with all cops. I just think that the story of maybe there's just a few bad apples. There's a lot of bad apples that are coming up of late. And at some point you have to reevaluate this apple tree. Do you cut it down, start from scratch, or do you continue to let the infested apples pollute the rest of the apples? You know what I mean?
I hear you 100%. I think, from the perspective that I see, right, which is, clearly a little different or in some cases even vastly different, is that I see kind of the same thing going on in some ways on both sides. And what I mean by that is that, you know, and this is I think geared more towards, I would say, the majority of the population, irrespective of race, and how they view police right now, which is exactly that. Is that, you know?
But I'm not saying it's all towards the black community either. I think that, you know, some of my white friends that grew up they were just, you know, if you want to call it, jacked up by cops for no reason too. I think that it's a community thing. I don't think it's specifically all black people. I think that in certain cases they may be unjustly detained or stopped or questioned just for weird reasons or whatnot. But I think you look at statistically, you know, white guys are shot more than, you know, I think black guys when it comes to, you know, statistically. But as far as innocent deaths and stuff like that, maybe the black community holds that, or maybe it's filmed more or talked about more via the media and news and stuff like that. But I'm not going to say it's 100% cops are this way towards black people. I think that once you're in a position of power and you kind of have a little bit of leeway, maybe certain people may take that to the extreme and push things to the limit. That just goes for anybody. You could be riding with me and, hey, we might get pulled over for who knows what and get the same treatment as me. But I don't think it's just a specifically black thing. That's why the community is coming together the way it is. I think it's just the general overview of how we see the police force. It's maybe a little bit too powerful, maybe a little bit too militarized, things of that nature. I do see, you know, I could argue that. I think that's one of my arguments is, you know, maybe the militarization of the police force as a whole, it's a little bit too much, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. So here's a question I have that I know a lot of, I'll just say, I think a lot of white people have, frankly, is that, you know, and again, it's not an accusation or saying that anybody is wrong. And I know there's times where I have the similar feeling, is that if across the board our expectation as a society is innocent until proven guilty, for the most part, right, is that, you know, using hate crime or race as a motivator for an action, to me, is something that I see gets thrown or put out there oftentimes just in race disparity and irrespective of the action. And to me, I think where a lot of people are frustrated is being, you know, assumed that because I'm white, I naturally, if I have a disagreement with somebody that's black, or I don't like somebody that's black, or you know, whatever it is, I get into a fight with somebody that's black, it's clearly because you're a racist. Like there's such an overcorrection, you know, for some of these wrongdoings, and 100% they're wrong. I mean, the George Floyd thing, like, fucking Stevie Wonder could watch that video and say that's fucked up, yeah. Right? There's no arguing that. But what I think, and again, I find myself in this same mentality, and I think it's important, you know, for both of you to know and think about it, and maybe you have some perspective for me that will help. But it is that, you know, when I watch that guy put his knee on the guy's neck, to having not known either one of them, having not seen any other aspect of it than just that taking place, and say that cop is racist. How do you know he's racist? Right? Is that, you know, to me, to automatically assume that, like, even if it's an easy thing to assume, to me, what that does, unfortunately, is that taints, you know, the actual prospect of that being accurate, to the tune of saying, well, that's no different than me saying, you know, Ahmaud Arbery, well, you're in the wrong neighborhood, you must have stolen something. Like, if you're a cop and you're, you know, battling it out with a black guy, just because he's black doesn't necessarily mean that cop is racist. He may just be a fucking asshole. And a guy like that's got 18 discrepancies against him that, you know, that are against multiple different races. I mean, to me, like, clearly the guy's a prick, but you know, that racially motivated charge is such a powerful thing. You know, it's a fire alarm. It's calling rape. It's as serious of an accusation as can exist. And when that gets thrown out there, say clearly that guy is. You know, to me, that's something where, just like rape or anything else, is that, like, you better be able to prove that that's the case before you just say that's what it is. And I know there's a lot of frustration from that. I'm curious to get your guys' take on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go for it, man.
Oh, my bad. To me, I see it as a racist act, right? And, I think it's until one lives in the skin of a black person, it's hard to fully understand what it means to be a black person in this country. You know what I mean?
Well, it's impossible.
It's impossible.
But,
it's impossible.
And not to interrupt, but we talked about this when you came on, was that, I hear that a lot. It's another thing is, you have no idea what it's like to be black in America.
Yeah.
You're right, I don't. But there's another side to that is that, both of you guys don't know what it's like to be a white guy in America, right? So, to be assumed that you're racist because you are white, or that, I did something, I mean, whatever the circumstance is, again, like when people feel like they're not being heard, and this is a classic example of neither side or both sides feeling like you don't give a fuck what I think, you don't give a fuck what I'm feeling. For somebody to just say like, well, you don't know what it's like to be me, it's like, you don't know what it's like to be me, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I'm not using that argument. What I'm saying is that, there's a lens, right? There's a different lens that we get, through life over time, especially when we've seen and experienced maybe not the same exact events that George Floyd has experienced, but we experience maybe similar events, or we experienced racism, or we've seen the look of racism as it looks us in the face. And I'll give you a few examples, and then I'll come back to the answer as to why I believe it to be racism. Racism playing a role as it relates to that police officer. Now, the other 3 police officers, one was Asian from what I understand, one was mixed, one was Hispanic from what I understand. But I'm just going to deal with this one white guy. But let me go back. I grew up as a kid hating police officers. And one of the reasons why I hated police officers was because I would see police officers carry out such negligent and disrespectful and sometimes evil events upon African Americans and Hispanics in the area that I grew up in. Not just in the Bronx where I grew up in, but in other parts of New York City, riding the train. And I would see the look of some police officers as I watched some of these things carried out. Somebody getting beat to a pulp for jumping the turnstile. And I would see a police officer, white police officer, look at me as if to say, and sometimes even said, you better keep going, boy. This is, you're going to be next. So I've seen that look before. I remember, and this happened even recently. I've walked into department stores and other stores, and I've felt the suspicion, and I've been suspected of times of being a criminal, of being someone who's going to, after having served in the military for 13 years. And I've seen what that look looks like. And then I've seen where I was proven innocent in a particular situation, and then the tone changed, right? I've seen what it looks like when I go to certain places and people have an expectation of me because I'm African American. And then I prove that expectation to be wrong. And they say something along the lines of, you're such a phenomenal speaker. You're just such an articulate young man.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. You're so intelligent. And to some people, they say, well, that's not racist. That's a compliment.
Well, it's underhanded.
What is the heart of it?
Yeah.
What was your expectation before? I'm going to get back to the point. What is the expectation of me before I came in? My brother, and I'm going to share this story, and I'm going to keep it short. My brother was intelligent, brilliant young man. He finished all his high school requirements in 3 years. He, by his 4th year, he was taking college classes in high school. He got a full-ride academic scholarship to study engineering in Syracuse University. Shortly before he committed to that scholarship, a white guidance counselor brings him into the office, his guidance counselor, looks him in the face and says, you are not suited for college. You need to go to a trade school. You're not ready for college. There's something wrong with you, so to speak.
Did he expound on it?
No, until my mother came to school and put his ass in check. My brother came home and he was distraught. And my mother said, wow, what's going on? And my brother explained that, my guidance counselor told me I'm not good enough to go to college, even though I got this scholarship, I need to go to trade school. My mother went down to the school and, like I said, put him in check.
Yeah.
And she's seen the look of this man, and she's seen him look back at her.
Yeah.
Now, he may not have said, you dumb nigger, you're not going to go to school. But that was the heart of what he was saying. You are not well suited for this program. Mm-hmm. And so I say all that to say, to come back to the officer, why I believe it to be racism. It's because I seen the look that he was giving those other African Americans as they stood around and pleaded for him to stop. It was a look that says, I can do whatever I want. He's black, he's meaningless, I don't care. And not 1 minute, not 2 minutes, not 3 minutes, not 4 minutes, not 5 minutes, not 9 minutes. We know how long it was.
Oh yeah, it was
and people were pleading, but not just people. We need to understand, black people,
right?
Right. And he had his hand in his pocket and a look of pride, saying, "What are you going to do?" And so for me, I see it as a racist act because I've seen that same look, that look that he's given into the camera. Some people may say, well, that's just your opinion, that's just observation. But when you've lived in this skin, as I said earlier, and you've seen a look as such before, it comes together. So
here, I'll play devil's advocate for a second, is that, admittedly, you grew up hating police, right?
Yep.
And so to me, while everything that you're saying resonates, and I'll share a couple of experiences that I had growing up as well that again seem to, at least I think from my perspective and from a lot of white kids that had similar upbringings in the 90s, feel very, very akin to the way I do about it. But is that when you have a certain upbringing where you see things, that's inherently going to
shape your
impact how you see things. No different than. There were a number of times in high school, because I was in high school during the Rodney King riots. Mm-hmm. I was a freshman in high school, and at that point, I was 5'4", 105 pounds. I was a fucking runt, and I got the absolute fuck beat out of me by about 40, mostly black male students. Mm-hmm. From the high school. They rioted in our high school and jumped every fucking person that was white that they came across. They destroyed a bunch of property, and I got caught coming back from lunch. I was going from the third floor down to the first floor, and I got the fuck beat out of me trying to go all the way down the stairs. Racial slurs thrown at me, all sorts of verbal connections to what was going on with Rodney King. And there were other times that just, my high school was a pretty big high school. It was about 35 to 40% black, otherwise mostly white, and there wasn't really much other population, race-wise than that. It was mostly just black and white. Uh-huh. And, it was not uncommon for, if a white kid was in a bathroom by himself, that he'd get jumped by, multiple black people. Mm-hmm. Now, so while I understand 100%, there's a look, and I think the three of us know better than most, to remove race from it entirely, to say we've all been overseas, and you can see when a guy wants to fucking kill you. Exactly. He doesn't have to say anything. Exactly. You can see the way he looks at you, and I have seen that look, again on the exact opposite side than what you're talking about, and I get that, and it's almost impossible not to have that influence. Impact and drive some of your perception of how things are going. My point with all of that is that, similar with me, is that, I may have preconceived notions now of saying, that guy wants to fuck me up because I'm white and I'm in the wrong neighborhood, right? Is that I'm in an area of town where I'm not fucking welcome, and I can see it, I can feel it, I've felt that before and whatever. My point in all of this is that, even with all of that said, is that, when that charge of saying what you did because you are racist, to me, again, it's the same as any other, felony charge, is that, there still has to be a quantifiable way to prove that when you're accusing people of it, instead of just saying, yeah, you did it because you're white and he's black, right? I mean,
no, I agree. And what
Can I add one more thing before that? Not to interrupt, just before I lose my train of thought. I didn't take the ginkgo biloba today. Mm-hmm. Is that, to me, again, if you look at it purely non-biased as you can, which for any human being is impossible, but is that the assumption that a white officer did something to a black civilian because he's white. Again, I view that as the exact same scenario as assuming that Ahmaud Arbery was up to no good in a neighborhood that he wasn't supposed to be in. Is that I'm assuming that because that guy is white and his knee is on his neck and he looks a certain way, is that was because of race. To me, I don't know how you separate those two as not being similarly dangerous in terms of making those assumptions.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is, it's like, and I want to use an analogy, but I want to just make sure that I'm not going too overboard with my analogy. But I say this to say, the contact wasn't racist, right? So what I mean by that is, I doubt Chauvin, whatever that police officer's name was, I doubt that he was driving down the street with his partner and saying, I'm looking for a black person to kill. Mm-hmm. Or I'm looking for a black person to kneel on their neck, right? He was put into a situation, and I truly believe that his racism rose up. And it transposed what was supposed to be a typical job, if that's what we want to call it, into what ended up becoming a racial situation. So, again, I'm not of the notion that this white person was, because a lot of people say, well, he wasn't racist because he wasn't driving around looking for somebody to hang.
Yeah.
But I'm really trying to use a good analogy for this.
Well, I mean, and I guess for me, I'm not saying that he's not. I'm just, to me, it's like charging somebody with something and presuming that they're innocent until they have the ability to defend themselves or at least be heard.
I would say, dude, honestly, when I first saw it, I haven't watched the entire thing yet. I think I stopped after he called out for his mom. And for me, I did, it was about, race, and it was a racist issue. But then what kind of drove that is that whenever you see a black guy who's shot by a cop or killed by a cop, the first thing that I see, the general public, even certain news organizations, what they'll do is demonize or try to criminalize the black individual without any due process. They won't go to court. That's the first thing that happens is, well, he had a rap sheet this long, and this guy was this, so he and I think that's where I kind of bring the race into it, the harping on the background of this guy. Like, dude, the old me was just in those lines, completely different personnel, but I think that, if the people knew who I was growing up, dude, it was, it was on a path to either jail or in prison. And just about everybody I know is there, that I grew up with. But I think that what it's become, it's the entire, argument, the entire conversation has been about race. It's, well, this guy was selling fake 20s, but then they bring up these weird accusations, and then, was he on drugs, or you get all it differs from another autopsy, and they bring up the rap sheet. It's like, why is all that necessary if it was just for a counterfeit 20 bill? My sister, she did time in jail for the exact same thing, almost, and that's her only rap sheet. But I think that just the over harping, and she's a good girl, I just think that the over harping of, well, this guy, even the Arbery case, his rap sheet, it's always the rap sheet is this long, and he didn't have respect for authority and all this and that. I think it's, just as much as we don't want to assume, or, the white people would not want us to assume that the cop was racist. I think that same, that same understanding and that same ideology can be applied to every time a black guy is killed by a cop. The automatic assumption that the cop was just doing his job, and the first thing that the public goes to do is pull up the black guy's rap sheet. Well, he had to be doing something wrong. I just don't see why it's always, well, this guy always has to be doing something wrong because of his background. But if you pull up the cop's background, 17, 18 different reports, it's like, well, when do cops stop just doing their job at certain points and they're just an asshole of a person or a racist person or whatever it may be? I think the benefit of the doubt always goes sways towards one direction. The same way the Me Too movement, every female that said they had that Me Too claim all assumption and all the benefit went to her, whether it was a real or not. I think that same should apply for, the black community as well. It shouldn't be the automatic, demonize this person because he was killed by a cop, and we don't want to make it about race. So let's find a reason to why this cop did go after this black guy. Well, he had a rap sheet this long, and it's like, it's irrelevant, in my opinion.
No, yeah, I agree, and I mean, to me, I think consistency is really where the heartburn comes from for all of us, right? Is that you brought up a great point with the Me Too thing, because that can be applied to all three of them, including women. Should a woman be able to say this happened and yep, no, that happened and fuck the guy and there's no investigation whatsoever? No, I don't think so. Should they be heard? Yes. Should they be believed? No, I don't think they should. I don't think anybody should be believed just because they said any fucking thing. And that includes cops, that includes criminals, that includes women, that includes men, that includes everybody. And to me, just like with, and I agree 100% in the interest of keeping consistent is, I don't think anybody in George Floyd's shoes, as an example, their rap sheet should be completely fucking irrelevant, right? To that. But you could use that same argument then, well, so should the cop not be afforded that same thing? He should. And in both cases, it's not, right? Is that you've got one side saying, he's white, he's fucking racist, he's got the look in his eye, he's beat up a bunch of other fucking people, he's a motherfucker. Right? I mean, you can tell by the video he's a motherfucker, but it should just be that video. Same with George Floyd. Like, I don't give a fuck what he did. But prior to this, I don't even give a shit why he was being arrested. The fact is that, he was handcuffed and face down, and there's absolutely no reason to have happen what happened. Furthering from that, I think, where I think a lot of people are frustrated and trying to find an answer in a lot of this is the actions now because of that. And the reason why I think it's important to show some restraint for everybody is that, when I see, and again, Nick saw it firsthand, mostly peaceful, and then it gets dark a couple hours later and now it's, fucking chaos, is that when that's going on, in every major city all over the country for, 10 days, 2 weeks in a row now in some places, now it's everybody's collective problem. And I think, again, on both sides of the token is that you've got people, who grew up hating the police. You've got people who grew up hating this group. You've got people that grew up loving police. You've got people that grew up, sympathizing with people that have it harder and maybe, feel the need to, or they're just in a position where like, fuck, I got to steal food to feed my family or whatever, that are more, empathy driven for that. Is that I think if everybody held themselves and any group or individual or perspective to the same standard that they hold everybody else to, so fewer problems would exist.
100%. Yeah.
I agree. Let me ask you a question. Sorry to backtrack. And do you think a lot of whites who may think along the same lines? Do you think that if George Floyd was, Jefferson Floyd, what I mean by that, if he was a white guy, right? Do you think that situation would have played out the exact same way? Or do you think others would have?
Well, so to me, there's two things. One is that ultimately, fuck, who knows?
Yeah. True.
But what I would say,
Just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, in the interest of this conversation, and again, we were talking about, the COVID-19, like, well, let's look at the data, right? Is that, to me, this is a very similar example in terms of, there's people on both sides of Corona. Some people are like, it's fucking bullshit. Other people are like, this is the most serious thing that's plagued our country in our lifetime, right? And so to me, like when you have two emotions that are completely polar opposite of one another, and there's emotion involved, clearly it's going to be somewhere in the middle, right? So if you look at the data on, in 2019 being the last year that that's been completed to be able to compile any of it, percentage statistically, black males, percentage-wise, in terms of per capita of what they make up in the population, around 14%, are at a higher percentage in terms of them being shot and killed by police than white males are. Now, far more white males have been and are killed by police than black males because there's a lot more of them.
Yes, blacks are the minority.
But there are dozens of cases where there are white men who are done the exact same way as George Floyd was. So it's not that it doesn't happen, and yes, it actually does happen statistically more than black males. Percentage-wise, if you break down the percentage, it is higher, but it's still a problem for both, right? Is that ultimately there's thousands of people that are killed by cops every year, and again, looking at the statistics, when you break it down to unarmed versus armed, and you could spend probably hours dissecting which one of those is more relevant to the discussion. To me, the easiest way to do it, because of what this movement seems to be about, and hearing a lot of sound clips of too often black men are killed by cops. It's happening all of the time. Like I've heard that from a lot of people. And again, this is an FBI statistic through UCR that is for 2019 is that in the entire year, and this is in a country of 335 million people with just shy of 700,000 police officers, there were 10 instances where African American unarmed suspects or interactions with the police where they were shot and killed. 5 of those where the unarmed individual were physically attacking the officer, and it was caught on dash cam, which leaves 4 more in terms of males, because there was nine males, 1 female. Out of the 4 that were left that weren't attacking the police officer, 2 of them were charged with murder, 2 of them were not, and one of them was a female that was tackled and was on top of, and she pulled her gun and shot. The other one where he wasn't charged was in a convenience store being robbed, where he came in and there was a struggle, and his gun went off unintentionally. Whether or not that's accurate, I don't know. My point to all of that is again, when you look at 335 million people, or 14% of that, 10, while if any one of these 10 were either of you guys or somebody that I knew, would I be crushed and devastated? Yes. Where I think it's dangerous and poisonous and makes it a lot harder to move forward as a country is when saying that a number like that, percentage-wise, when it's a fraction of a percentage. And again, please, anybody listening, don't take that as me not valuing their life, because I do. But to say that is systemic genocide of black men in our country by police officers, from my perspective, just again, if I'm not emotional about it, because again, I'm not looking at it from the same viewpoint other than just the straight data, is that seems like it's a dangerous proposition to present to people. So I would ask you guys, what are your thoughts on that?
I have a couple, man. I think that one, I'm somewhat, I've been told, I don't know, I'm skeptical a little bit about stats or whatever. And I'm not saying that systemic racism is only in the police force. I mean, this whole entity of the government, whatever you want to call it, as a whole, is systematically designed for people that look like me and Remy to not succeed as great as someone else. It's a statistic that 1 out of every 4 white households, the chance that one of those families will have $1 million net worth, or accumulate $1 million out of 1 out of every 4 white households. The statistic for black individuals is far, far, far less than that. But with statistics, I look at who's writing this stuff, man. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that it's not true or whatnot, but the same people who file out these police reports and you find out that they've been lying or whatnot, how much of those statistics of, this person was this way, this, or unarmed or whatever, went for my gun, I was in fear of my life. I've heard that from guys downrange and guys here on the police force that, being in fear of your life, is a cause to, take someone else's life. Statistically, I think that what Remy said earlier is that this may have been the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm not saying that, 2019, there were 10 blacks who were murdered by cops, and so many are way more whites who were murdered. That's 2019. But from our grandparents' era, I think that not having an open dialogue of this system that was initially designed to keep people of color oppressed, it's never been addressed. You know what I mean? And working in multiple industries, let's say the Hollywood industry, I've seen a lot of racism there, you know, from my perspective, and being told I can't do something because it won't be accepted by a white demographic for a major cable network that I won't talk about. Sir, what's that?
Black, the saying, you know, black doesn't sell. Black doesn't sell overseas.
Exactly, yeah. So it's a real thing. And I think that you can look at any, I guess, major TV show. How many black shows are there? I mean, we had them in the 90s, like, you know, I hate to say it, you know, Bill Cosby and stuff like that. Or even movie-wise, if you look at the black movie, it's always the same story. You know, why is there not any other story? It's always, okay, we have Harriet Tubman, we have the slave stuff, we have this, but where is the modern day? You know, why are black people only viewed in this light? You only get a very small slither of this whole big picture of America, but we're always, you know, put in this little box of you can do X, Y, and Z, and that's about it. That's what people want to see. That's, I think, the systemic oppression or racism is that, you know, people are talking about, not necessarily all in a police force, even though I do think it is there just because of the roots of its nature and where it derives from. But the police force as a whole, I think the nation, the community, even you included, if you've had bad run-ins with the police force or anybody, I think the message of the whole is everybody, black, white, has a view of police when it gets a little bit excessive. And not saying that George Floyd, him being a black guy and a white cop that killed him, is a racist thing. But I do honestly think that was representative of what a certain demographic of people, black people, have been feeling for a long time and have never got a chance to actually express grievances. It's always, oh, well, it happened X amount of years ago, or you weren't a slave, or, you know, you don't know any slaves or anything like that. It's always been, you know, get back in your place, know your lane, and we don't talk about that. But if you go to a place like Germany, they talk about religiously to make sure they don't go back to that portion of the Holocaust, you know. We just haven't had that same afforded discussion with the nation as a black community. It went from, okay, we're going to hate you and attack dogs on you and, you know, bomb your neighborhood and what was it, Tulsa, you know, and now that that's all done, we signed a bill, Martin Luther King shook hands with the president and made peace and but people who were in office, they stayed in office. The people, that ideology back then, I don't think it really ever changed and got a chance to be addressed. And this incident was just representative of a bunch of different things that people saw in an oppressive lens. And this is the straw that, you know, finally broke the camel's back. That's what I think. I think that this was just representative of something that needed to be talked about and hasn't been talked about for a long time.
I think that's a good point. Did you want to?
Yeah, and you know, I think just kind of touch on what Nick said. You know, for me, one life is one life too many, right? And then along those lines, also, like I would really be interested in finding out, because I haven't been able to find research on this. Maybe you've come across it, but statistically, as far as the whites who were killed by police officers, mm-hmm. how many of those were negligent incidents? How many of those were absolute, like the neck on the knee on the neck, the cell phone that wasn't the gun? That's a separate question, but
well, I mean, from what I saw is that there were 21. I believe it was 21. It was right at about double the amount of white males that were killed by cops that were completely unarmed. I don't know, you know, what those circumstances were, other than that they weren't armed, and I don't know how many of them were charged or not. You know, again, there's a couple of cases that I saw that were, for me to watch, were equally as difficult to see, of white guys going through similar scenarios, but there was a few of them, you know, and so to me, I guess, you know, again, I like, the last thing I want to do is trivialize anybody's life. I agree, like anybody dying in that circumstances, you know, should be unacceptable. I also know that, you know, we've all been in positions where you know, I feel like you can at least empathize a little bit with police officers in the job that they're doing, trying to do the best with what they have.
Absolutely.
And I think 99.9% of them do that. And I think where it's hard for them and people who sympathize with police officers is I think they view it the exact same way, right? Is that, if there's, a swath of the population that views black people in a certain light because they're black, no different than, a group of people. And I get that cops aren't born cops, but they're still in a chosen profession where they're being viewed based on, how they look, essentially, is that they're in uniform, right? Is that they're still being treated a certain way based on the aesthetics of who they are. And it's in a hugely negative light, So I think, again, my goal for everybody is for both sides to say, you know what, I want to understand how you're feeling.
Yeah.
But I think it has to be met halfway. Like, if it's just, you need to fucking understand how I feel and I don't give a fuck how you think.
Yeah.
Then you never get anywhere,
No, I agree.
So,
I agree. And I was just bringing that point up to say, as Nick kind of touched on, if we count those numbers, and again, I don't remember the exact numbers you threw out, but let's just say it was just 9, right? 9 unarmed black men. When we tally that number up going all the way back hundreds of years, I think that's where a lot of the anger, frustration comes from, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, I didn't live in the slavery times, right? But my ancestors did, right? My great-great-grandparents were slaves, right? And so many of my ancestors and so many African Americans died in this country and was oppressed and died in this country because of slavery, right?
Yeah.
And then we continue down to Emmett Till's, and we continue down to the Civil Rights Movement and Martin Luther King, and all of these deaths, all of these numbers have piled up. These are the sins of America, right? Yeah. And so as we get to this point now, the expectation, and I said this in a video, I think last week or a week and a half ago, the expectation is there has been change. Mm-hmm. The expectation is a George Floyd type event should not happen, right? So, and I'm not saying that you're minimizing it in any way, but so one is enough, right? So I think that what it kind of boils down to is, let's just say the numbers were 9 last year, mm-hmm. but the numbers are hundreds of thousands, possibly millions going back, mm-hmm. on this land, here in America, and it shouldn't be happening again. And so I think a lot of it is, putting statistics aside, it's just hundreds of years of this. Mm-hmm. And when is it going to end? And, just let's use, women's rights as an example, right? For the most part, women have been able to vote for how long?
I mean, since I think it was 1918 or 1920, somewhere in there when suffrage took place. But
yeah, so if it was 2020 and women were still struggling to vote, there would be a lot of anger behind that.
Sure,
I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure there would be. I think again, I mean, all you have to go off is statistics. Is if, all I could find was back to 1970, is that, the amount of U.S. citizens, period, from 1970 till now, even though the population has over doubled since then, I believe, is that the amount of both, again, U.S. citizens across the board, especially and including black citizens, has dropped significantly since then. So to me, there's a number of points to make, I think, but, I understand, I think, how the feeling would be to a certain extent. Can I step into your shoes? No. Again, the same way, you aren't going to be able to step into my shoes and view it from my perspective. But is that, you're always striving to make progress. Is it ever going to be perfect? No. Do you always try to make things better? Yes. To me, in the interest of trying to find solutions is, so now, okay, let's say we've unswept this under the rug, and the data is what it is. There's a perception on both sides of how that's reflected and what that really means. That I think that's a big part of it too, is that, if the data, if I think that the data means this and you think that the data means that, where do you go from there? I don't know. So to
the
me,
door's open, man. I think that's where America's stuck, though. I think that's where it's stuck, man. Where, guys like me and Remy feel are viewed things through a certain, dude, I think, reality is only what you perceive, So through the lens of, Remy and me or somebody else will always be different from, someone else's reality will always differ from ours, man. And I think that agreement that, okay, well, no matter how we see things, you can't be in my shoes and I can't be in your shoes. That's where we find that common ground and we accept that. Where do we go on from here is the question that really may have not been addressed. And I think a part of that, where do we go from here? It's an open discussion about the way the system was designed, maybe to specifically target Black individuals. I mean, 1906, you were talking about, you grew up in the Bronx or New York, right, Remy?
Yeah, Bronx, New York.
1906, man, they had a kid they brought in from Africa. I think it was the Bushman is what they called him. I forget his name, but he was on public display for, at this, the Bronx Zoo, put on public display as a Black guy, and he ended up killing himself. He was just something for people to go see and spectate. He was a Bushman. They called him a monkey. They put him in the cage with the monkey and all this and that. And people loved it. They went to go flock and see it. And that was back in, 1906. Even science, dude. I think science was a way to, view or make people view Black people in a certain way. Charles Darwin and his theory on evolution is all derived from the ape man. And the ape and the Black person have the closest, gap in between their evolution. And then you have the white male who's way up top, and his gap between the ape and, him and the ape is pretty drastic. And the whole system, Yale University, Harvard University, they all put into this, big scheme of the Black male is primitive, small mind, and that's how we evolved from monkeys. That whole thought process comes from that. So science, even being heavily rooted, Charles Darwin, his theory on evolution is heavily rooted in racism and the view of a Black person being an ape. And that's still being taught in schools today, just as, Christopher Columbus coming over here and slaughtering an entire, people, demographic nation of people. And we still celebrate those holidays. I think that there's a lot of, racist past or racist history that is still being taught today, and maybe the full spectrum of where things come from and derive from is not fully out there. And that's just, two examples of science and 1906 being, a Black guy put in a cage with a monkey and being displayed at a public zoo for, I think 40,000 people at one point went to go see this Black kid and chased him through the town or through the little zoo area. And the kid ended up shooting one of the people chasing him with the bow and arrow, and they put him back in a cage. And this happened for a while. He was, stuck in a cage. Black people are always perceived to be that way. It's just heavily rooted, man. I think that there's a lot of stuff that we haven't talked about, and science. We're talking about Yale and Harvard University and theories such as the theory of evolution. It's all based on, keeping and viewing a Black person as a certain way. And is that science? Do we still consider that science? Do we know it's wrong? I'm no different than you are as a man or DNA. But it was all at a certain time when it was to make, eugenics was heavy back then too, and Black people and all these things were all designed to make us to be viewed in a certain light. If you look at science like that, man, that's at what point is science real? Is it designed to keep a certain person to feel a certain way, or is it really science? Is it facts? We know that's not facts anymore, but it's still used to this day.
So here's kind of maybe an out of left field question that as you were talking about that, it just kind of popped in my head. As I'm curious, have you ever stopped to think, and I haven't until just hearing you say this, is that where do you think that came from? Going hundreds of years back and getting us, to where we're at today, why would it have gotten to that point, or what would be the reasoning for a society to treat different races a certain way?
The unwillingness to understand. I think that's the unwillingness to understand. people who are unwilling to understand someone else. Having a simple mind. I think simple-minded people live in a closed-minded space, and they don't want anything else to get inside that mind space. So anything outside that mind is foreign and alien, and either must be destroyed or it's an alien. We treat aliens, even in this country, no different. I don't know, man. I think that it's just the unwillingness to understand someone else or where they come from. Just having a closed, simple mind,
And I think part of it is fear too. It's like if I don't conquer this group first, they will conquer me, right? Like if I don't conquer this tribe will conquer me. I mean, and we see that even today in politics, right? If I don't conquer this party, then this party's going to conquer me. So I think a big part of it is fear.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought up politics. We were talking about this in the ride from the airport over here a little bit, is that, I'm curious, and again, this is a question for both of you, is, where and why do politics seem to have such a definitive line on an issue like this? Because there's a, and we were talking about coronavirus, like you can make a lot of assumptions that are generally accurate based on, what people's perception is on coronavirus and how effective it is at killing people or not. Should you make those assumptions? No. But when you see that cause and effect of why is there such a party line divide of, right-wing conservatives are this way on this issue, left-wing liberals are this way on this issue, and there seems to be almost a mindless, blind allegiance to, party bullet points.
That's the point, man. That's the
issue.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's votes, right? At the end of the day, it's that way because, and I could be wrong on a number, but I think 50% of the country believes one way, right?
Yeah.
And about roughly about
no,
50,
it's damn sure about half.
and about 50%, or maybe it's 40-40, and then 20% is everybody in between, right? But you got a large group that thinks and leans one way, and a large group of people that thinks and leans another way. And the game is at the top, how can we maintain this base, or how can we pull from this other base so that we could continue with our political interests?
Yeah.
So,
and so on the politics front, right? Here's something that confuses me. That again, in researching some, just different elements in trying to come up with some things that are not just front sight focus of what's going on right now. Looking at historical, aspects to what may contribute to this is that, so in 1865, at the end of the Civil War and when the Emancipation Proclamation took place, that's when the KKK started, right? And in all of the research that I looked at, the KKK's primary responsibility and goal in its inception was to destroy the Republican Party because of them not wanting to let go of slavery. Fast forward 150 years, and frankly even less than that. I mean, a little over 100 really in the 1960s when now all of a sudden
black men were taken out of the home, right?
Well, the perception of political affiliation gets flipped completely upside down as it relates to that issue in particular. I find it ironic, I guess, that that there's a significance in how that whole scenario transpired and kind of what it's morphed into today as it relates to political leanings on both sides. Do you guys have any perspective or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've never been a part of a political party, and bro, I've never even voted, man. Just personal beliefs that I think that, one, I don't think that the average voter has enough monetary value to influence or gain any benefit from having a certain politician in office. We're not the average person isn't a billionaire or own a big multi-billion-dollar franchise or company to make large donations to a political or a politician or a political party, to have someone kind of sway in our favor to begin with. And I think that the whole division of having a choice to the left side, right side, blue side, red side, it's crippish and bloodish and kind of gangish to me. And I think that it puts people in a box to where, and in it kind of adds like it creates a space to where you can't think for your own per se. You kind of do, but then you have these certain bullet points that certain political parties believe in and they talk about. And if you're not in that line, then you're not truly a Republican or Democrat for that matter. And it's just there always is going to be a constant division with political parties and interest and things of that nature. I personally just don't believe in that whole system. There's two hummingbirds right outside this window. It's pretty badass. But
both sides I heard Ice-T say both sides of each wing is on the same bird.
But right.
Both sides of each wing is on the same bird. And that's why, I'm an independent. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. And the reason why, I chose, because I still want to have some type of say in the voting process personally. And it's just, but, I've learned that how much has changed for the most part, even if we went back 70, 80 years, 90, if we can go back to the 70s or 80s or even 90s, you know what I mean? Like, we've had Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Barack, Trump, right? Like, how much has really changed as it relates to each party and each side? So, like, to me, as what Nick was saying, I just see it as it's just a big game. It's a game, and people are the pawns within this game, you know. And so I can't really answer your question specifically because I don't study politics.
Yeah, I and that's why I don't like politics. It's because it does, and it's designed to pit people against each other. There is no real common ground to meet on, and from Democrats, most of my family are Democrats or whatnot, and I don't necessarily believe in all that either. I think that all the presidents you just named off, a lot of them were for adding more police, more prison systems, stop and frisk and stuff like that. War on drugs that's a complete lie. There is no war on drugs. And you got big banks shipping this stuff in. Black people don't own boats to ship in crack or cocaine, And so it's not getting here by us. It's getting brought in here by somebody else, and we don't have planes or boats. And I also think that when it comes to the whole, like the political party and the sides back to the police, and Bill Clinton was for adding hundreds of thousands of extra police to the police force, and then specifically I think it was 50,000 police to go into high probability neighborhoods or black communities. 50,000 alone just to stop the crime. And statistically, let's use New York, for example, when the police force backed away, they vowed to back away. I forget what year it was. I'll have to get back to you on that. But all crime dropped with the police being less of a presence. It wasn't just a rise in crime in New York. But I think that no president or no political party really was for. It's all been the same, in my opinion. It's all been the same. Eric Garner, using him for an example, was a few more that died back under Obama's watch, and not one cop was arrested or put in jail. So, investigated as much as we are doing with, the case we have going on now. I don't think any president really has been about anything, in my opinion, other than a financial gain and people who donate the most to them. It's not specifically for one certain type of people. Even if it was about, let's say Barack Obama was just for black people, I don't think that necessarily that you're excluding a lot. You're excluding a lot, and it does create more of a problem. White people, I'm sure, would feel a certain type of way if it was just, hey, black people, you can get whatever you want. I wouldn't be comfortable with that. I like to work. I don't like things given to me, but to each their own. And I don't know. I personally just don't think that the politicians have our best interests as the average Joe Smo civilian at heart.
Yeah, I would take it even a step further. Is not only do they not have our best interests in mind, is one, like you said, they go out of their way to divide and pit one another against each other. Yeah. And ultimately it's about power. Is that when you're scared, fearful, you think things are a mess, and that you have to depend on the government, then you do, and you vote for them. You know, and so to me that's part of the element of some of this that that's why I bring up the politics going all the way back to 1865, is that politics plays a huge role in it, and I think that's where it interjects manipulation and the ability to make people emotionally pissed off about certain things, and then now there
is an agenda. There's and that's another piece to it, right?
Yeah.
There is an agenda, right, on both sides, right? And again, what it all goes back to is, in my opinion, is maintaining a base. At the same time, there is a reality. Mm-hmm. There are people who are really upset. There are people who really want to advocate for change. And just like there's opportunists out there in the streets, like, rioting and stealing and looting, there's opportunists in politics, sure. trying to use these events, sadly, to their own benefit.
Do either of you feel that the perspective of some of this has been used to manipulate people to be pissed off to make the president look bad? Do you think that there's any element to that?
100%. I do. I do. I think that there is a certain element that is pushing an agenda, and looking at, I hate politics, but like so let's say the Democrat side, and I'm not, I don't really care who's president. You know what I mean? I just don't. I don't think that what they do has really that much of an impact. They can't send me to war anymore, so I'm good. I don't know. I just think that the agenda right now, it's once you've failed so many times at trying to defeat someone, maybe you just keep trying. I don't know. I think that, let's say the Russia incident or the Ukraine incident, I think it was Ukraine, right, with Trump?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that, man, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of BS being put on the table for people to get distracted by and potentially sway a vote a certain way. I do see that. I don't think that everything he does is 100% bad either. I honestly think he's a puppet. I think any president is a puppet that is there to only push an agenda for something else or somebody else. If I were in charge of this whole master game, I wouldn't let someone come in and change my whole scheme every 4 years or every 8 years for that matter. Congressmen and congresswomen, they're in, office for how long? As long as they want to be, almost, right? And if I have an agenda to push, and I'm the one that pushes and passes these bills in the Senate and Congress and all that, man, I think that, I'm not going to let someone who's here for 4 years change that plan. I think that person is allowed to only stay within a certain lane. They're what the people see, and they're like the bullet sponge. If you want to get mad at the government or you get mad at the president or whoever the president is, that representative of this larger entity. That's what I don't know. I think that, but it's 100% just something that wants to be pushed politically. There has to be. There's no, why else would there be people seeking power? The only reason why to seek power, or the only reason why anyone would seek power, is to, have an influence over something. So it's 100%. I think that the race may be interjected into certain portions, and I also think the other side, let's say the Republican side, tries to maybe take that out of the equation, that no, it can't be about race. But as Remy said, and we've all acknowledged that, as a black guy, I might see racism here and there or through my daily life, just like Remy might. Guys in Baltimore might see it a lot too. And Republicans say, no, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. But how is anyone to say it doesn't exist?
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, it's undeniable to say that it, or it's incorrect and wrong to say that it doesn't exist. I mean, to me, of course it exists. I think where we as a society tend to run into problems is the assumption that it happens without being able to say, yeah, this is it. Because, and here's a question for you guys also. This is something I've heard, more than once throughout my entire life, is that, it is essentially that black people don't have the power, authority, ability to be racist. And I'm curious to get your guys' take on that.
I've heard that too, man. I've heard that too. And throughout my entire childhood. Damn, Remy, am I cutting you off, bro?
No, you good.
Can black people be racist? Well, the definition of being a race. You have to be, in a position of power, influence. I'm trying to think of an example. Can you give me an example of yeah?
All right. Well. So there's a couple things I think is that to me one of our society's problems. Maybe it's semantics and too nuanced to matter, but to me words do matter in some contexts, and this being one of them. Is that the textbook definition of racism is to put the value or the superiority of one race above all others, right? So that's pretty general. But what I think is a big problem is the term racist and racism being A, overused, and B, misused, more importantly. So there's a huge difference between racial prejudice and racism, right? Those are not the same thing.
And implicit bias and
So for me it's again I think we talked about this the first time you came on, is that there's an overwhelming feeling of the perspective of you mentioned being in a store and feeling like you're being accused of something, or you're in a certain area and you're more likely to get pulled over, beat up by a cop, etc., statistically speaking. There's another side to that, and again, this is where I can tell you, for me and for a lot of silent majority white people out there, is that there are plenty of places in this country that you better fucking believe I can't go to, right? If I went to your neighborhood where you grew up, you think I could walk around there okay?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
You think I could walk around south side of Chicago?
Not mine,
okay?
bro. Not mine. My old me would have jumped you. I'm just playing.
No, I mean, well, okay.
I think it's because it's the way you carry yourself.
Yeah, well,
You know what I mean?
But again, to play devil's advocate is that, so if we can assume that if I walk down Crenshaw Boulevard in Compton, looking the way I look, right? Let's say I don't have the tattoos and a bald head because I'm fucking can't grow hair anymore.
Everybody would think you're a cop, and you probably want to get messed
You
up.
might get checked.
Maybe, but there are. I guess my point is, there's plenty of places in this country that even in the hometown I grew up in, where I'm not welcome, right? And certain other groups aren't welcome. That seems to be forgotten about. And again, most people's response when they're sympathetic to Black Lives Matter or the other perspective is, you're privileged, shut the fuck up, right? Is that like, oh, you have it so fucking bad, you're a straight white guy, tell me about all your fucking problems. Well, I can tell you, like, there is no quicker way to build resentment against oneself than to dismiss the feelings of somebody else. Like, irrespective of whether or not you think they're valid, no different than if I say, dude, what are you whining about, right?
Yeah.
If I come to you and say that, what do you feel? Fucking pissed.
Yeah.
Well, if I say, dude, there's places I can't go, there's people that hate me just because I'm white, or they assume that I'm racist just because I'm a white guy, or that I have implicit bias, or that I'm okay with systemic racism, or I have white privilege and shit is just given to me. There are tens of millions of broke ass white people. Again, does that mean that they have a better deal than some people? For sure it does. Are there some people that have a worse deal than anybody out there? Yeah, there are. We've all been to other places on the planet that make being born in this country of any race, sex, creed, religion, color, whatever, a winning lottery ticket by comparison to being born in a lot of other places. And so to me, it's like I want more than anything to understand where the collective Black community is coming from, because to me, if I don't understand it, then there's no way I can even attempt to be part of the solution to solve any issues. But again, I encourage anybody.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I honestly, Remy, I think that dude, correct me if I'm wrong, bro, but I think that this whole movement is like more than just one particular, topic or one.
Yeah. And I said, you respond on it. I said this to somebody the other day. I said this. It's not just it's Black Lives Matter, Black stories matter, Black justice matters, Black education matters. You know what I mean? Like that's that. I think a lot of people in outside of who oppose the Black Lives Matter movement, they see it as just one thing, right? They see it as, well, it's just about a white cop killing a Black person. It's about more than that, and that's why I said earlier, this goes back hundreds of years. This is this pent up frustration, anger, and disappointment that goes back, right? Because we have gotten to the point where it feels like Black stories don't matter. It feels like Black education doesn't matter. It feels like these things, as it relates to the Black community, even the brown community, even if it relates to the Hispanic community, doesn't matter. So, sorry for cutting you off.
I mean, I
Perfect, man. I think that's perfect, man. And that's okay. So if we took the movement going on right now, and if everyone took a tactical pause and said, okay, George Floyd, what happened? That's it's terrible, tragic incident, right? But that's not what all Black Lives Matter is about. I'm not Black. I don't know. I'm not a part of that organization. If it is an organization, I just know that there's certain types of racism. I do believe, Black lives do matter, but I'm not saying that no one else does matter, I just think that what Remy brought up, a perfect example of schooling and stuff like that, schooling, Black stories and things of that nature should all be addressed and maybe brought up. I think that's what the whole conversation or the movement, they want the conversation to be about. Is not just to focus on white cop killing, a Black guy. It's about all this stuff accumulative that we should talk about and address. That, Black schools are underfunded. The way to make it to an Ivy League school, if you wanted to, it's not the same as, per se, the average, or not the average, but compared to a white individual, it's not the same.
And even opportunities, like even opportunities and resources to get to those places, you know what I mean? And because sorry for cutting you off, Nick, education is a resource that gets you to that next level, right? Let's just look at, SEAL training as an example, like a resource that you need to have access to in order to get to that level of expertise or get to that level in the military. That resource is absent. And for the most part, in a lot of, I'm speaking just specifically for the community I grew up in, that resource of just being able to go to a clean pool and swim and learn how to swim is non-existent. Yeah. Even in high schools, the resource of having soft guys come to a high school and speak about their experiences and teach, hey, this is what we do, come in. That's almost non-existent. When I was, the deal. When I was helping out with the Motivators office back when I was in the teams, a lot of the places we went to were, pretty suburban areas, suburban high schools, lifeguard events. I can't remember what they call them, but they're like lifeguard academies, and so they're getting a resource where they're just like, oh, now I know what this is. Oh, now I know I could possibly be able to do it. Oh, now here's what I'm gonna do. The majority of African Americans and Hispanics that I see get some sort of access to that specific resource was athletes, D1 athletes. When we started, bringing in the different football teams and specifically football teams and rugby teams to come in to go through the process, so they get exposed to it. So again, I'm not saying this to bash the teams in any way. I'm just using that as an example and essentially say that, a lot of it is resources, and that's where we get to this point of feeling, and I'm sure Nick feels the same way, that it's systemic, because, if I don't know what it takes, or if I don't see an engineer, if I don't see a SEAL, if I don't see a doctor, if I don't have access to those resources that are going to get me to that step, I'm going to be locked into that cycle, for the most part. And, going back to what I shared earlier, as it relates to film and TV, and Nick can, he relates to this 100%. I've been in those meetings where, an executive says, Black doesn't sell. Maybe you could potentially do another story, but it's going to be hard to get this project financed because, the finances might not want to come on board. And here's the deal. If those resources not in place to be able to tell this story, then you know what? Kids who look like us are not going to be able to see that story on the screen or on a TV show and be like, oh, wow, that's there. I can do that too. And so, sorry.
Well, no, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead if you had something else. So I'm just curious, that perspective of, Black doesn't sell. Do you think that that's accurate, or that that's a manufactured perspective on their part, that they just don't want Black stories to be told?
I personally think that let me back up. I think that garbage doesn't sell.
So you think
Right?
it's a lack of quality?
I think that let's look at it from this perspective. And Nick, he knows this 100%. How many African American ensemble films, or where were created in the last, let's say, 6 years, where the budget was over $70 million or $75 million? Black Panther, right? How many white films were made over the last 7 years where the budget was over $70 million, right? Now, I think that what it comes back to is quality. I think that what has happened is, in the past, there have been projects that were made, black projects, but the quality wasn't up to par. The resources weren't up to par. Maybe the storytelling, whatever wasn't up to par in order for it to do well, right? Just like there's tons of white films, like that don't do well. They bomb at the box office, right? But there are other white films that do well. But see, we don't get as many chances, in my opinion. I don't think black films get as many chances to fail as white films do, right?
So there's two things, I guess, and maybe you don't know. I sure as fuck don't. In terms of Black Panther compared to its budget, do either of you guys have any idea how it did respective to the budget? Did it do?
I think it did like $1 billion. It did like,
$1 billion, $1 billion. Crazy amount of money.
Yeah. So I guess
look at the quality that they put in it. Look at the resources that they had to be able to bring together that ensemble, right? And do all of the things that they did.
So I mean, to me, the odd part to that, I guess, is that as a business owner, to me, if let's say I'm in the business of making films, and if I have an example like that, why wouldn't you do that again then? Now, I understand from a business standpoint, if you make and you do as good as you can, and you put as many resources, if that's not what they're doing, then they should. That's an element to it where, to me, where I think sometimes the prospects and the elements and the principles of business get convoluted by the politics of race, of sex, of gender, of things of that nature. Is that to me, the weird thing about movies, not the weird thing, maybe the unique thing on movies, is that it's art. And so it's it depends on who likes it, whether or not, and you kind of never know. But I guess the reason I bring that up is that when you take something like that versus any other aspect of our society, where, say, affirmative action is a part of it, right? Where there's quotas of hey, this company needs X percent of black men, X percent of black women, X percent of females, period, in these sorts of realms. Do you feel that there is an element of that is necessary, is appropriate? Do you think that those types of things should be applied to the movie making industry?
I think at the end of the day, if you qualify for the job, you need to get the job. So, we know, like, one thing I loved about the teams was the fact that it's performance based. Yeah. Like, black, white spans, I'm sure it's the same thing, for the soft units that Nick served in. Yeah. Like, it's performance based. If you suck, black, white, whatever, guys are going to call you out, right? If you're great, black, white, whatever, guys are going to let you know you're a good dude and you get the job done, right? Yeah. I think that first and foremost, again, you need to be able to be qualified to be able to do the job. At the same time, I think that there's a space where we need to, there needs to be let's say that there was a quota. We need to fill this spot with 2 black dudes or 3 black dudes or 1 woman and 2. The most we need to, the companies need to do the best job they can to find those black or white dudes to fill that spot, right? Because of the fact that in those spots historically, there hasn't been any diversity, if that makes sense. They still need to be qualified. They still need to be able to do the job and better than the people that did the job the year before. But at the same time, I truly believe that there needs to be a space made at the table, because historically there hasn't been the space made at the table and able to ensure that there's diversity. And then take a step further, we need to go, before we even get to the table, right? While we're out at the door, there needs to be resources in place to ensure, more resources, better resources in place to ensure that those two women or that one black dude are able to even qualify to get to the table. A lot of what, what I touched on earlier, it goes back to the resources. If you don't have the resources,
Yeah.
you're not going to get there.
So I've got a two-part question, and I'd love to get Nick's input on this as well. Is that, for those that would say, okay, I look at both of you guys, lack of resources, right? Grew up in I guess you'd call it an inner city,
Bronx, yeah.
a predominantly black neighborhood that had some issues with the cops, et cetera, had no resources. Both of you guys, despite all of that, have made it to soft units, were overwhelmingly successful, great reputations in those, have gotten out, transitioned to be wildly successful entrepreneurs, both of you, despite all of that. So that there's that perspective. What gave you guys the ability to despite those hindrances still be able to do everything that you've wanted to do, for the most part, or generally speaking?
For me, it was my mother. This is just simple. It was my mother. My father, my story. My father died when I was 5. My mother we were in Africa, and, my mother's an American. And, she had nothing. She had the Nigerian government stripped everything. So when my mother brought my brother and I to the States, my mother said, listen, in order for you guys will be somebody. And in order for you to be somebody, you're going to have to work 10 times harder. And the reason why I was able to do it, was because my mother instilled this concept of excellence. Whatever you do it right the first time. If my mother would make my brother and I wash dishes, and you know what? If we didn't wash the dishes perfectly and dry them perfectly, she would throw them in the sink and make us do it all over again.
I'm battling with my daughter right now with that shit.
Yeah, she would make us start all over again. My mother would make my brother and I read New York Times articles and books and write reports on it. And if those reports weren't near perfect, she would make us go to the newspaper, pick out another article, and start all over again. What my mother was telling me is she would make us, do these extra assignments and do things over again. Is you guys are black. Things are not going to be handed to you. Like, you're going to have to work 10 times hard. You're going to have to push the needle. You're going to have to almost be near perfect to achieve any level of success. And that was true. The only reason why I'm here where I'm at right now, and I'm sure Nick would say the same thing, is because I had that instilled in me and I bust my ass.
Would you say it's the same on your end? Your dad?
What's that? No, dude. His story of the same thing as mom told him, the exact same story, the exact same words my mom has used on me, or to me. I have to work 10 times harder. You have to be perfect, because the minute I mess up, they're going to harp on it, and it's because you're black. Dude, I've been, that same exact story. And dude, if I didn't I had a certain set of chores I had to do when I got home and throughout the weekend. And let's say, for example, one time I forgot to take out the trash at the time, ended up going to sleep, and my dad, dumped all the trash on the bed with me, and I had to pick it up and finally take it outside. But everything had to be done at a certain time, a certain way, perfect. There was my mom would always say, don't half-ass it, don't half-ass this, don't half-ass that. And if I did, for me, it was either get your ass beat or you got to do it again. And joining the military, it was, I wasn't going back. I couldn't go back home, it wasn't a good place for me. I just was ready to go. It was not good for me. And I had no option but to, and I'm petty, bro. I was real petty back then. I already told everybody I was going to do it. And for me to go back, I was not going to, no, I was proving a point. It was all about proving a point. And the only reason why I started off doing a lot of the stuff that I did was to prove a point, and the entrepreneurship side, I was scared, even getting started, because I had no idea what I was doing. I had no resources. I learned everything online, didn't know what to look up. So I just gave something a shot, and, I didn't learn how to get drunk and write a journal, and that turned into a book. That just kind of happened. And then everything else thereafter, I've never had an agent. Never had anybody represent me like that. I've talked all my negotiations, and dude, I've learned by emulating people I watched on TV and lots of Shark Tank and reading books and stuff like that. So I just, that's where I learned, but there was no option of going back home and anything like that. I was always told that it was going to be 10 times harder, and I had to work extra hard. When I got into battalion, my first sergeant, the only other black guy there, he told me the same thing, the same speech. You have to work 10 times harder. You have to. These guys are going to kick you out. They're going to try to find everything they can to get you out of here. That was the words told, to me by my first sergeant before he left. And it was just 100%, man. It was there's a name, I won't say it because I love Ranger Battalion, but there's a name for the battalion that I was in, 3rd Ranger Battalion. We'll just call it 3rd, starts with an R, something battalion, 3rd Ranger Battalion. But yeah, it's known for that. So being the only black guy there and hell yeah, you have to work harder, man. You have to shoot better as a sniper. You have to shoot better. If not, dude, I wasn't a terrible shot, Wasn't a terrible shot. Wasn't an awesome PT person either, but I never quit. Wasn't allowed to quit. None of that, man. That goes for anybody, but being black and that story that, Remy just told, my dad have, echoed that same exact phrase. You have to work 10 times harder because you are black.
So go ahead.
Sorry, and I was gonna say another piece to it is, especially as you excel into these realms like Rangers or to teams or just even buds, just training alone. And even my brother, I have a half brother who's a doctor, and I have my full-blooded brother is an engineer. That teacher that tried to get him to go to trade school instead of Syracuse University. My brother and my mom went there, like I said, tore his ass anew. My brother ended up going to Syracuse University, got a full ride scholarship for his master's for his bachelor's and his master's, and he's an engineer. But I say all that to say, like, in all of these realms that, I just mentioned, we are the only, for the most part, there's not that many of us. Right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, so, it's like, you're remembered, right? Sure. Like, you can't, my brother's a doctor from the Bronx, you know what I mean? Yeah. He can't, people are going to remember him. People are going to remember his failure more so than they're going to remember the 10 other white doctors' failures that are around him, right? Because he's that unicorn. And it's the same thing when I was in Buds. It was like just the nature of the beast. Like, my class started out with 240, 250 dudes. Guess we started out with 3 black dudes. Everybody knew my name day one. All instructors knew my name. All the students and instructors knew my name day one, right? Because I'm the unicorn.
All the black guys.
Yeah. So, and because of that, you're highlighted more. And because you're highlighted more, you have to operate with excellence and kind of work 10 times harder. So, that kind of plays into it as well.
So there's a unique aspect in hearing both of your stories about despite not having the same resources or what one may consider adequate resources, is that you guys had the ability to succeed anyway, and it's for the exact same reason as that family. Yeah. Right. And so to me, that would beg the question then is it about resources or is it about family? Because I don't think it's a stretch to say, okay, if you go into these areas where there's no fucking resources like that and you just dump tens of millions of dollars into it without having that family dynamic influence to actually take advantage of those resources, do you still think that's going to be the, not magic pill, but the ability for those resources to be taken advantage of, or is that going to be a lost cause in certain respects? Because if there's the common denominator of family that's giving you the ability to, despite everything that you don't have access to still be able to get where you want to be, how do you measure that out?
I don't think there's a cookie cutter answer. I don't think that it's like, I think every situation, every home is different for the most part. I think like I know there was this African kid who grew up like a few buildings from me, and his mother was always gone. She was always gone because she was raising 3 brothers by herself, and she was always working. So he didn't have that mother. His father I think his father had died, so he didn't have his mother or his father in his life pushing him, right? Yeah. So, but he didn't have the resources either, right? So, but he's a doctor now. He's another dude who's a doctor, right? Yeah. And so I say all that to say, I think for some people it may be you give them the resources, they'll be able to run people with it. For some people, it may be you give them the resources and the family, they'll be successful. For some people, it may be you just give them that family aspect without the resources, right? I think that having the resources gives you a better chance. Mm-hmm. That's why one thing I'm a big advocate for, and I talk about all the time, and I'm always in schools, is education. If anything, if we can dump as a society, as America, we could dump more money into education, right? Especially specifically in inner cities, right? To paying teachers better. So they're more motivated, to do their job, giving teachers better books, giving them better technology, creating an atmosphere where the kids just want to go there and learn, right? And they don't feel like it's just a check in a box. That will change the game, and once that happens, once that resource is in place, that just sets the stage for future success. My mom would tell me, my mom was a teacher in the South Bronx, so my mother would come home and tell my brother and I stories like, I can't believe that I walked past a classroom and the teacher was just sitting at the desk, not paying any attention to the kids at all, not teaching them or anything. She walked back, same thing, walked back. Yeah, they just gave them the work. The kids were rowdy, doing all this crazy stuff. And then the bell rang and the kids left, but there was no real teaching because there's some teachers that just don't care. Not all teachers, but there are some bad apples, right? Yeah. And so it all goes back. Like, I think if we're going to dump the money anywhere, we need to dump it in education, right? And those resources, whether a kid has a family there or a kid doesn't, I think that is one step. Now, there will be some kids who just won't take hold to it, right? Yeah. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think, for sure resources always increase, chances. To me, where I think it's hard is how do you can't force people to take advantage of opportunity, right? And to me, where it's, and I'm not saying I have even the glimpse of an answer to this, but it's trying to figure out, how to instill that family component, because I am a firm believer in that is the most important foundation.
Family's got to be there. Family's got to be there. You look at the average, let's say, black household, the father's missing. One of the biggest questions I get asked a lot of the time is, are both your parents, you have both your parents, are they divorced? And because it's typical for, the black father not to be in the household. I had, still to this day, both my parents are married. But I know a lot of black guys and families that, the dad is just not inside, in that family due to an old weed charge for small possession of marijuana, and he's got 20 years in prison or whatever it may be, something small, a small infraction. And the situation that family may have been in, that it may have been the only way for that family to make money or to make ends meet was, I have to, sell weed or I have to sell drugs or whatever. And it's a terrible way to look at different things or to look at it that way. But in these inner cities and in the projects or in bad neighborhoods and stuff where that does go on, like legit, there's not too many options to really get out. It's just not. I don't know why it's like that, but it's rough. It's rough you have to fight 10 times hard to get out that community and then 10 times hard to survive once you're out that community. But the fight, alone could be just getting out. You're living in a poor environment. And it all goes back down to financing. I think financing and what's available to certain communities. Certain communities have certain different finances and different things afforded to them, opposed to inner city communities that don't have really much of anything other than more police, and having, it leaves an open door, a large room for bad things to happen, I think, Yeah,
I went to my high school last year, and I walked into the entrance, and it was like walking into a police station.
Really?
They were like, they were stations, and you had to walk through a metal detector. There was like at police stations, they had the check-in desk. There was a check-in desk with 2 police officers on one side. There were about 4 police officers congregating, and then there were 2 police officers at the, monitoring the metal detector and the, going through the plane, whatever that thing is called. You put it on the conveyor belt and it goes through. And so it's like, man, in my mind, I knew I grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood, but it was like, man, how did it get this far? And how can we take this and transpose it into some type of financial benefit that we could use for the education, if that makes sense? Like, what means can we put in place to change this? Because the fact that we're having to spend money for police in the school versus spend money on books. Like, how did we get that far? And to me, it goes back to leadership at the school.
Yeah, I mean, I have, no intimate knowledge of the issues that's plagued it in terms of why the police are there. My first question would be, I can't imagine a scenario where they're just like, that school over there, let's put 8 cops there.
No,
like
I'm not saying that's it's gotten that bad because of the violence in the school.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, like, at the leadership level, how did that violence get to that point where it wasn't kept in check? So now we have to spend money on police versus spending money on education.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on that, irrespective of race, neighborhood, whatever, is that it always boils down to the foundation laid by the parents. Is that if there's no expectation of manners and empathy and doing the right thing and having a parental cohesive unit, whether you're married or not, I think it's better if they're married. I don't think it's necessary. But if both of them are leading by example, and instilling the same types of things that you guys were told by your parents, that I was told by my parents, there's a common denominator in the three of us, is that we all had parents that sat us down and said, here's the fucking deal, is that nobody's going to give you a fucking thing.
Yep.
You have to go out there and earn it. My parents told me the exact same thing. And I think if you don't have that, and now all of a sudden you're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old and you're in elementary school, and you find yourself causing a problem and there's no consequences for it, because now our parents are hamstrung and have the inability to raise their children how they see fit, coupled with the fact that you've got most school systems are in that same boat, is that there's a political correctness aspect to where they're so hamstrung to where they can't dole out any discipline. And so when you have parents that can't discipline their kids, coupled with an administration in school that can't discipline their kids, again, black, white, brown, yellow, whatever, is that that's going to lead to an entitled child that thinks I can do whatever the fuck I want. As they get older, now it turns into where now we physically can't even keep them from doing whatever they want, and now the police are involved. That's my perspective on it. Is that because you see that in a lot of school districts all over the country, even in affluent suburbs where, kids are causing some pretty serious fucking problems. And again, like, the school that my kids go to, there's 4 or 5 police officers. It's an affluent suburb of Dallas, and they've got a fuck ton of problems. The high school that I grew in, we had plenty of problems.
Yeah, but at the same time, they got the problems, but they also have resources to deal with that problem. But that's not taking away from resources that's going to education, right?
For sure, and that's probably the starkest contrast, and I agree. I think there should be way more federal and state funding for all schools. To me, again, that's the most important investment. I mean, I would be all for saying, every dime of fucking foreign aid that we're giving to Egypt and to Pakistan and to Afghanistan.
And that's where it starts, man. I think that's where it starts. That's the conversation. Like, that's where it starts. That's where we acknowledge that, okay, well, out of that whole movement that we, generalize as the white cop, black guy dying, now we've broadened it to, okay, that movement, a part of that movement has the schooling system and the funding of all schools for that nature, or for that matter. That's where, we've come to that, okay, well, now, I'm not saying you're part of the movement now, but you agree with one of the parts of the movement, that make up that entire movement. And that's one of the things that we can all agree on, that, yes, schooling, all that needs to be for everybody, not just, all black kids, but everybody. Also, like you named in Dallas, certain schools that you can go to. Every school needs that. I mean, we just dropped trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, this fictitious number, on a virus, and that's trillions of dollars in a matter of weeks, man. Just imagine what that could have been used for, if we would have used that here, stateside for our own people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And again, I mean, to me, that in all of life, the foundation is the initial 6 years, 7 years of your life, because at that point, once kids hit 5, 6 years old, now they're spending way more time with classmates and with teachers than they are their own family.
Yeah.
And so in that first 6 years, like if you're not there showing them how to be the way they need to be.
Well, what if we change that too, man? What if there's too much time in school? You know, what if there's not enough family time?
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think there is. I think
Complete
a lot
reform of the entire system is my opinion. I mean, if you look at it down to that, I think that everything else in this nation has changed but school. You know, there's a lot of stuff that changes, but the schooling system has always been the same. You work, you know, these many hours. School to me is nothing more than a daycare, exactly,
yeah.
for the parents to go to work 9 to 5 or 8 hours, and it's a daycare. There needs to be a complete reform of not just the police system. If you know that's one part of the movement, but there needs to be a complete revamp of maybe the schooling system, the healthcare system, of all this stuff that's been unchanged for hundreds of years, our centuries, our decades for that matter. There needs to be complete reform in all of that. Maybe that's where the start is at, you know, and it won't look or appear to be, where I grew up at is white kids have the best school, they have the best computers, they have the best technology. If everybody was afforded that, then that kind of takes away that dialogue of it being about race. Now we all have that playing field to start off on. That's where we could come to a common ground on.
Yeah, and that was the same thing in my neighborhood. You cross the bridge, you go into Manhattan, you know, especially, you know, you're seeing all white kids, and, you know, nice schools. I mean, some of the schools look like college campuses almost, you know, the buildings are phenomenal, you know, and then you look at the schools that the blacks and the Hispanic kids have, and it's just a diametric opposite, you know, it's diametric, so.
Yeah. It sounds like, you know, one of the most common ground perspectives, I think, is you know, putting a ton of funding into education and trying to lay the best foundation for our kids as possible, because, you know, again, that's what's going to turn into the next generation and how they conduct themselves. I would love to get any perspective from you guys that we either haven't talked about, or, you know, things that you'd say, you know, hey, here's what I want to ask you. Like, do you guys have any questions for me?
Oh, bro, I mean, I hate to, because I hate doing this because people do it to me, is where, you know, because I'm black, it's like I don't know. But for white people, I guess it would be, if I had to ask one question, would be why. Oh, that's a tough one. Okay, for, I guess, the black community, if they have a grievance or something, or a particular issue they want to address, it's either never addressed, or it's, but why this, but what about, you know, black on black crime, but what about Chicago, or this and that. It's like, and I get it to a certain degree. I do know as a black person and as a black guy that, dude, there is a thing about, you know, black on black violence and hate. Dude, I think I've been hated on more from black guys than I have from, you know, anybody else. And I'm not sure from my community if it is because of just the way we've been brought up, or the way that, I'm not sure. But you know, for some reason, every time that there is a grievance from the black community that they want to address or bring to light, it's, oh, well, it's a long time ago, it was this, or it's not as bad, or anything like that, instead of just lending that open ear. Not saying it's you. I know you love, I mean, bro, we're here having a conversation, but I think from the comments and the things that I see on my page or interacting with different people, it's, okay, well, you have a problem, but what about this problem? Instead of, okay, well, let's work on figuring something out if there is a solution, opposed to just brushing it off as to, well, fix your issues first before we can, you know, work on anything else. Everybody has their issues, you know what I mean? You know?
No, it's a great question. And, you know, obviously I don't speak for the collective white race, right? But I think there's generally a more similar perspective, you know, with people that are like me, right? Just like there is in every group of people. There's, of course, always disparities, differences, things that aren't paralleled at all. But, you know, in thinking about that and saying, okay, why would that be the case? It makes me think of human nature, generally speaking, is that I think all human beings, again, irrespective of race, of sex, of socioeconomic status, is that if there's something that they can't relate to and doesn't really fucking register with them, I think they're naturally going to be dismissive of it, and just really be like, yeah, it doesn't really affect me. I don't see what the fucking big deal is, right? And the reason I say I think that's on all sides is, again, I've experienced, that like I said, and I think I've probably learned this more from trying to be as good a father as I can, in terms of projecting and seeing my kids' perspective, is that nothing creates animosity for kids towards their parents than be dismissive of what they feel. It's very easy for a parent, right, to say, oh my God, are you really bitching about that?
Yeah.
Right? It's like, but to them, it's a big fucking deal, right? And so, yeah, and so to me, but again, it's on. I think that white people are as guilty of that as anybody, but I think everybody is, because again, if there's a group of people that I think, ironically, or whether you think it's the case or not, that can probably sympathize with the perspective that you guys are coming to the table with, it's straight white men. And I know most people will be like, are you fucking serious? Here's what I can tell you as being one of them is that I can tell you nobody, and I mean fucking nobody, gives a shit what I think about anything. Right, and I get assumed all the time that I'm bigoted, that I'm racist, that I don't fucking care about anybody. That I'm selfish, that I've had everything handed to me, that I've never struggled ever, that I've always had everything fucking easy, and that I have absolutely no reason to bitch about anything ever. I can tell you that straight up. And I will say that most other white men that I know and talk to feel the exact same way, feel like nobody gives a flying fuck what we think. Now, again, I have no doubt that most people would hear that and be like, the fuck do you have to bitch about? And again, to me, I'll bring it back to the kids thing, is that everything is relative. Everybody has problems, everybody has struggles, and the way I always try to look at everything is that, and one of the things I try to instill in my kids, employees, you name it, is that every day you wake up and you're given a choice, an opportunity to either focus on shitty things, right? That you can focus on your classmate that's prettier than you. You can focus on the kid that grades come way easier, whose parents give them whatever the fuck they want and are way richer than we are. Or you can look at it as, there are people that I go to school with, or that I'm in the country with, or that I'm on planet Earth with, that were given a far, far shittier hand than I have. And no matter who you are on the planet, you can always find somebody with a better deal and find somebody with a worse deal. And I just always try to look at it as that there are a few things that I can control. And I look at it from if I focus on the things that I know I have intimate control over, and I just put all of my energy into that, that's going to increase my chances for success the most that I can control. Is that a guaranteed recipe for success? Of course not. But back to your question, is that I think most white people, just like people of every color, is that if they see somebody that they can't relate to whatsoever, and they're complaining about something, they're going to look at it and be like, I don't get it. Who gives a fuck what you think? I mean, I could be wrong.
No, dude, I can see that. I see that. I didn't think of it like that, so I appreciate that. I didn't think that, honestly, I did not know that, the white straight thing was even a thing till right now.
Yeah, and again, in having conversations with people, over the last couple of years, whether it's police departments or personal protection dog clients, or guys that I live in neighborhoods with, or I've been in a unique opportunity in working with police departments and folks all over the country, and seeing different parts of the country in a lot of different ways. Some of the most upscale neighborhoods in the country, on personal protection dog sales, and some really fucking rough neighborhoods with police departments and their canine units that I've worked with over the last 12 years. And so it gives you a broad perspective of kind of what the collective pulse of the country is in all different aspects. I don't pretend, to be able to understand what anybody else goes through, even other white guys, whatever. Are there some parallels that maybe are going to be a little more apt than others? Maybe, but to me, ultimately, is that again, I feel that way a lot, and to me, where I think every side needs to understand is that, if you want somebody to listen to you, you have got to be willing to listen to them.
Yeah.
Because and again, like we're all fucking guilty of that, but that's my take on it.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I agree 100%, man. And I think that's lacking, maybe people have that mentality. Well, fuck you. I can't relate, so I'm not going to even listen. You being able to listen and have a dialogue is what I think collectively everyone in the nation could use right now, is everyone having an open ear. I think that may be the case. It's just too many people just don't care or don't see the correlation between someone else's life and their own life. And it kind of, you get that shut off, you know what I mean? Like, well, it's not affecting me, so I don't really care. And I think, houses burn down all the time, but I'm not going to sit here and cry about it. So I can see where you're coming from. I think that mentality can extrapolate itself and become, play along those lines of like, well, it's not affecting me, so I don't have to really worry about it as much, when, technically we all should.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's just human nature to a certain extent. Is that it's hard to empathize with anybody else if you just can't fucking see it from that perspective. But
I agree. Yeah, agree. I can see that, man. Hell yeah, yeah.
Do you feel like there needs to be a fix? Do you feel like, as far as it relates, like, let's just deal with specifically policing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there needs to be a fix, and if so, what do you think those fixes are?
1,000%.
Yeah.
And I've heard the two most prominent things that I've heard recommended for fixes in selection and training. And I've thought about it for a while, and to me, there's two things with that. Is that what I worry about with selection, and this is not me saying there shouldn't be selection. I think the SEAL teams and all of SOF units are classic examples of where, super tough selection yields fantastic results. What I worry about with police is that, when you compare special operations, that's overwhelmingly performance based.
Yeah.
Whereas the issues that surface in policing are primarily morality and character trait based. Mm. And so, to me, the other thing is we need way more funding for training. I don't think that's the answer either. And here's why, is that I think, and again, at the risk of sounding like a pessimist, I know what it was like when George Bush was in office, and we had the Golden Cruise box and we were funded out of our ass. And then, when President Obama took over and there just wasn't as much money. When I came back as a trainer, I was like, holy shit, you guys have no fucking money. That was the perception. But my point to that is that when we had all of the funding in the world, that didn't make guys better operators. It didn't give them an ability to, on the battlefield, presented with that same scenario, it didn't make them more moral human beings. And so to me, where I would pull a page out of the U.S. military is in accountability.
Yeah, that's 100%. 100%. That's what I'll ask. That's one of my answers.
And if there's one thing that I would say that I can't agree with more, or that I'll even fucking take the lead on, and I've got a lot of fucking police friends, a lot of fucking law enforcement officers are no doubt listening right now, and fucking 99.9% of you guys are phenomenal men that I'm thankful every day that you guys put your life on the line for all of us collectively. However, is that there are too many examples of what I would even say in some special operations communities, I can only speak for the SEAL teams, is where discipline problems, i.e. a DUI, well, it's a senior chief, we'll let that one fucking slide. Oh, you're an E3, fuck you, you're pulling your trident and you're gone. But when it comes to things overseas, everybody has a very high fucking standard in terms of the things that we're talking about. To me, there's a big difference between a disciplinary action with a DUI or missing equipment or something like that and killing the wrong fucking person overseas. And the U.S. military, I would say maybe even a little too much, doesn't fucking give their guys the benefit of the doubt. Now, there has to be a high standard, but to me, if there's one thing that would change the entire fucking game that doesn't cost a fucking dime, is to just hold guys accountable and not just say, well, he's a cop, he's probably in the right. Now, that doesn't mean when you fuck up, you should be fired and charged with whatever we can stack at you.
Yeah.
Just treat them the same way you would an average individual.
Yeah.
You know, if we're legitimately all equal, then cops should be treated equally, you know, and not in a bad way, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fastest, cheapest, easiest fix, because, you know, that's what's kept, you know, the amount of incidences overseas being at a minimum. Do they still exist? Yes. But, you know, if I may project and put myself in your guys' shoes, is that one of the biggest heartburns is that when something like that happens is they get away with it, right? Is that, you know,
Brother,
either,
that's it right there. Those are the words right there. Yeah, that's it.
yeah. So to me, it's like, well, if nobody gets away with it anymore, two things happen. One thing is people don't feel like they're being fucking trampled on because they're not. And two, now every motherfucker before they decide to throw their knee on somebody's neck is going to think twice about it.
Exactly.
You know, and so to me, like, that's not a complicated thing to fix, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, and yeah, I agree 100%. Accountability.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why what happened. That's one of the reasons why what happened to George Floyd.
Yeah,
happened.
well, yeah, I mean, so imagine any of us having 17 fucking complaints or whatever it was against use of force issues overseas.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't live to see the third one, probably not even the second one.
No.
You know, and again, doesn't matter whether it's me, whether it's you guys, fucking doesn't matter what our race is. You go over there and you fuck up, you're going to pay the man quick.
Yeah.
You know, and so, but we all know that. Yeah, but we all know that, right? And so that's always in the back of your mind. And you know, I know that we probably have similar feelings with sometimes that's a detriment. You're like, fuck, I can't even do my job, you know? But you know, to me, what's irritating about that is that, and I'm not belittling, you know, non-U.S. citizens in terms of us, you know, being able to treat people more poorly because we're overseas. But it's the opposite of that. Like, why are we being held to a higher standard being outside the country than our own police officers are inside the country when interacting with other U.S. citizens? To me, that's fucking terrible.
That's it, bro. Like, that's literally right there, man. It's we could all agree on something that can be fixed. It costs no money at all and would, you know, create change. And I think that's what, you know, collectively everybody wants, is just a change to, I guess, for everybody, a change for everybody. And your, you know, solution is 100% spot on, perfect, man. I agree with that. You know, I think anybody would agree with that.
Yeah, well, and you know, a lot of times it gets talked about, well, we don't have the money for this, we don't have the money for that. Again, that doesn't cost a fucking dime, A.
Oh.
And B is that, you know, if you take all of the, you know, not to get too far in the weeds on the political aspect, but, you know, the tens of billions of dollars that gets allocated to foreign aid every single year. Like, to me, every dime that gets spent in that regard should be passed by itself as an individual bill, the same way any other spending bill is, but with one caveat, is that it's only, you know, one lump sum of money for that country for this, and it should be passed like a piece of legislation, just like everything else. But before that even happens, is that we say, clearly we have a problem here, that there are vast pockets of the country that are woefully underfunded. We're gonna take a 5-year pause and fuck everybody for 5 years, and every. Yeah. And every dime of that is going into fucking federal and state funding. I mean, to me, there's two pots of money. Is that now we're saying, okay, you've got whatever it is, $20-30 billion, and each state gets X, and then federal funding has X for supplemental stuff. Yeah. You know, so those.
Lower everybody's taxes because of that too.
Absolutely. Right. Which is only going to help the economy, right? So you're fixing a lot of problems with that, but it also, you know, the beauty of it is that the accountability thing, like, that's right now. That's dumping quick clot on an arterial wound, because you can do that right fucking now without hiring anybody else, without conducting another day of training. It's, hey, motherfuckers, there's a new sheriff in town and this shit isn't flying anymore. That's it. You know, and then now you're backfilling that, so that's the arterial wound, or the Band-Aid on it. That's a big fucking Band-Aid, and then now you're putting all of this money into laying the foundation. That's going to take years to enact, but by continuing for us to just fight and break shit and you've got no reason to bitch, or no, you've got no reason to bitch. Like, where is that fucking getting us? Nowhere, And so, to me, the last point I would bring up in terms of how to help fix it is for everybody to take a second, fucking dial it back a notch, and stop being offended at every little fucking thing, right? And that's for all of us.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do sometimes when there's emotion involved. And one of the topics I did want to bring up is the kneeling during the anthem thing. As we kind of wrap this up here, is that I wanted to get your guys' take on that, because I think that falls into some of what we're talking about here. And I'm gonna have some honest truths with myself on that, but I wanted to get your guys' take on that.
Yeah, my take is I don't have an issue with it. I think going back to why me, Nick, and you, we did what we did so that so that people would have the freedoms and abilities to live freely and protest in any way they want to protest, and get their point across in any way they want to get their point across.
Yeah.
I know that over the last 2 months, I was able to meet with and connect with Nate Boyer, and Nate Boyer is the one who gave Colin the Kaepernick the idea to kneel, instead of not being out there. He said kneel, it's not disrespectful, and so I don't have a problem with it. I think that's why we fought, so that NFL players, basketball players, whoever can protest in the way and protest in the way that they want to protest, and that's a peaceful way to protest. And one of the issues that that has come up lately, and I've been thinking about it a lot more, is there's been a lot of anger and frustration, even from my side, from me, period, as it relates to the destruction and the burning down of houses and burning down of properties, and I'm not condoning that in any way. And I don't want to say it was as much anger, but there was a level of anger when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling, right? And it's like, you didn't want to hear him when he was kneeling peacefully, but now you're responding when things are burning down. Does that make sense? And so I say all that to say, it's what we fought for, man. We fought for him and other NFL players to be able to protest in that way. I don't have a problem with it. I don't see it as disrespecting the American flag. It's weird to me that people do say that it's disrespectful to the American flag. When our brothers and die and sisters die overseas, and we have a memorial service, what do some of us do? We kneel before their shadow box, so to speak, right? And their helmet and their weapon. So I say all that to say, I don't have a problem with it. I don't see it as disrespectful.
Same, bro. Same exact. Like, I would just regurgitate exactly what you just said. I'm the same way, man. I think that we fought. It's the constitutional right to peaceful protest, and peacefully protesting. He's not hurting anybody who kneels. Or NFL player, it's not hurting anybody. Not burning anything down. They're not, driving cars through crowds of people or anything like that. They're just taking a knee. And anybody who's been to a football game, go to the back section where they sell all the chips and stuff, during the national anthem. And you can see everybody out there doing whatever they want to do, and talking, drinking, whatever it is, taking a shit in the back, whatever. I don't have a problem with it. It's not hurting anything. And if to be from my opinion, to be a soldier or to go overseas and deploy and fight and use I fought for your rights and all, it would be kind of, it just would, it wouldn't be right for me to bash anyone to exercise that right that I supposedly fought for, that, it's their God-given right. As long as you're not hurting anybody, it's perfectly fine on my end. Burning the flag, I think, would be like disrespectful. I almost called him Haji. I've seen people in Afghanistan and Iraq do that stuff when they protest and burn the American flag. But to take a knee and like you said, you talked to Nate, Green Beret gave him the idea. I think that from one brother to a civilian to give that idea, and then for the civilian culture to say, well, you're disrespecting the flag and the troops. It's like the idea came from a troop. Exactly. That was his idea. So,
Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's a couple things in terms of my perspective on that, is that I agree in that, to me, I guess I would say it doesn't matter if I have a problem with it ultimately. And there's a couple of reasons for that. But there is one caveat that I'll circle back with and bring up at the end, is that first and foremost, the NFL is a business. right? Is that, you know, NFL players, when they are playing on the field and they're in uniform, they are at work. Now, a lot of people use that as a reason to say, well, that's why people shouldn't be allowed to protest, right? There was a guy named Greg Anderson, a cop that just lost his job in Seattle because he went on a rant while he was in uniform about, you know, cops taking rights away from people during the Corona bullshit and whatever, and he lost his job because of it. And people say, well, see, so he lost his job because of that. And while I hate to see that happen, and I you know, think that there's probably a right, not probably, there is a right way and a wrong way to do that. Using that as the backdrop of saying, well, see, so now if he loses his job, why shouldn't, you know, an NFL player lose his job? Well, there's a huge difference between police and a professional football player. Yes, they're both being, you know, paid to provide a service. But ultimately, whoever makes the call is who? It's the owners of those businesses. You know, and in this case, is the police department a business? No. But it's still a police chief that sets protocol and policies based on what he thinks best. And if he thinks that, you know, you're not allowed to display or conduct yourself in a manner where you're interjecting your personal politics while in uniform, while on the job, posted on social media, then that's his fucking rule. If an NFL owner says, you know, hey, yes, you know, while whatever other business owner may say, you're not allowed to fucking work here and interject your politics into my business, that's their fucking prerogative. So to me, for the people that are upset, you can vote with your wallet and not watch football if you have that big of a problem with it. And I would agree in that, you know, from a freedom of speech standpoint, you know, there's an element of that to it, but I think, you know, bigger picture wise, just like with Twitter or with Facebook or with Instagram or whatever, is that, you know, those are private funded companies. And they get to decide what they put on there or what they don't. And if you don't like it, don't use their platforms. To me, it's not even so much about freedom of speech as it is, you know, these are privately held companies, you know, that they dictate the policy that they allow their employees to engage in. And you have the ability to vote with your fucking wallet. It's really that fucking simple. Now, I will say the caveat that I want to bring up, though, is for some people, and I'm not putting myself into that category. I'm saying, you know, do I like to see it? Not particularly, but it certainly doesn't chap my ass. You know, I don't sit here and lose sleep and become infuriated and say, I'm never watching another fucking football game and I'm burning jerseys and shit. No, I don't give anywhere near enough of a fuck to do anything remotely close to that. Is it something that I think makes sense on that spectrum? Not particularly, but I also, you know, can separate my emotion from the fact of, you know what, it doesn't fucking matter. But here's my caveat is that, you know, for some people that's wildly offensive, right? Now, I may not understand that. And here's where this is as much of a question as it is anything else, is I want to tie in racial slurs into that. Is that and there's two parts that we'll get into that with next that I have written down, but you know, for some people, a racial slur, they don't give a shit if they're called that. For some people, they will fucking kill you over it, right? Is that for a number of reasons, is that there's some people that feel that passionately about them being, you know, disrespected. They feel disrespected. Now, the person that's disrespecting them may not think that it's disrespectful. You know, somebody kneeling may say, well, it's not meant as something disrespectful. The same way somebody may say a racial slur and say, no, I don't mean it disrespectful. I mean it in a pop culture reference. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just, you know, it's in songs, it's in, you know, regular vernacular. People use it all the time. That's how I mean it. And it's like, for the person that's over here with clenched fists ready to strangle a motherfucker, I don't care how you meant it. You know, that's how I took it, right? And all I'm saying is that I think it's valuable, again, on both sides, is that for one side to say, you know what, yeah, I do understand that this is how you feel is your best foot forward to be able to communicate what you're pissed off about. Also realize that may piss somebody off, and to just trivialize their feelings by saying, well, I didn't mean any disrespect, doesn't mean that they don't feel disrespected by it. So there's kind of a lot of angles to that, but you know, that's how I view that. Any comments to follow up on that?
I didn't quite understand the question, so I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right. Is the question like, why is it all right for one side but not all right for another side?
No, I think, you know, again, in the interest of being, consistent is just understanding that even though I don't get offended by somebody kneeling, right? I think they should be able to do it.
Yeah.
But I also understand that for some people, they do.
They do, got it.
You know, and so just like, you know, somebody, you know, there may be people that use racial slurs that, you know, a white guy may call a black guy something and they laugh about it and he doesn't, and the black guy doesn't give a fuck. The guy next to him maybe wants to fucking cave the guy's head in for saying it. And for the white guy to say, hey, I didn't mean any disrespect, that, you know, I'm not saying this because I'm knocking you or that I'm a racist or I'm racially prejudiced. It was a joke or it was a whatever. Well, motherfucker, I didn't take it that way. Is that my point is that there are some people that feel that strongly about the kneeling during kneeling during the anthem, that, you know, whether you meant it disrespectful or not, that's how they took it.
Got it.
Even though that's not me, I'm, you know, my goal is to try to understand everybody's perspective and help everybody understand people's perspective so that we don't get our feelings hurt, which leads to my next point is that, you know, in talking about getting the feelings hurt, you know, people talk about words matter, and there are times where it's unavoidable for them to matter, no matter how bad you want to try to keep them from having teeth to be able to hurt people. But I also know that, you know, the communities that we come from, right, is that the fastest way to bring razzing and being picked on and fucked with is what? Well, it's letting somebody know that something bothers you, right?
Yeah.
Hey, you got a big fucking nose. Yeah, okay, yeah, big bird, toucan. Yeah, I got it. It's funny.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm like, hey, fucking talk about my nose like that. Like now, all 15 of my platoon mates are gonna be like, hey, fucking Pinocchio, what's up, buddy? You know. So what I'm, and this is as much of a question as anything else, is that do you think that two things is, one, that if racial slurs, specifically the N-word, because that's by far the most controversial and insightful, probably, you know, word that's probably in the English language, is that two things. Is that, one is, if do you guys think that if you collectively said, you know what, who gives a fuck, do you think it would be used any less? B, you know, the second part of the question is that if you take the stance of, if it's wrong, it's always wrong, do you think that would help? Do you think either one of those two things would fix that problem? Because the way I view it is that, you know, a lot of times people say things because they get a reaction out of somebody. I'll quit flapping my gums and give you guys the floor.
Yeah, I personally don't think those two solutions would fix the problem, personally. I just think that's a word. I mean, I can't really go into detail about this project I'm working on, but, you know, we talk about a project online and I'm working on now, and just where that word came from, how it was used, as I'm doing my research, and I'm seeing the different ways it was used, and how it was used under the tone of anger, and how it was used under the tone of grace, and how it was used under the tone of false love. It's just, it is a nasty word. I don't think there is no fix for it. You know, I do, you know, we do hear rappers who use it in their lyrics. For the most part, you know, 99.9999999% of them, pretty much all of them, are African American for the most part. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, it's been transposed into a different meaning for the African American community, and it's spelled in a different way. And so, do I like hearing the word in lyrics? No, that's why I don't listen to that type of music. I don't like hearing the word, period. You know, that's why I don't like, you know, I don't listen to that music, and I try not to say it, and I try not to use the examples the best I can. I know I used it earlier, you know, but, and this is something I try to teach young kids in inner cities. Like, you know, I said this earlier, like last week, I said, you know, my mom would tell me as a kid, never give anybody an excuse to reason in their mind as to why that bad thing that happened to you, you know, mm-hmm. Never give them an excuse. And so, you know, if I'm walking around saying that word, like, even though they shouldn't have an excuse to use it, they're going to easily have that word to use it. They're going to be able to use that word and have an excuse as to why they're using it. Oh, it's because Remy did it. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's because Nick did it. Oh, it's because I heard it. So me personally, this is something I try to teach my kids all the time is, you know, be careful what you say. Mm-hmm. And that word will not be used in our house, period. If I ever hear you use that word, you're going to pay the man for it, you know? But I don't think there's any fix. I mean, going back to what we talked about earlier, it comes back to family, right? It comes back to parents, white and black, you know, sitting their kids down, and African American community sitting down with their kids and saying, hey, listen, this is where this word derived from. This is how this word was used against us. I don't ever want to hear you use that word to anybody else, whether they're black, whether they're a female, male, whatever. I don't want you to use it. I think it goes back to the parents, and then obviously on the white side being educated, and that's on that side by the parents as well. But I wish I could snap my finger and that word never existed, but it's going to exist to the end of time for the most part, and that's my 2 cents.
I'm in the same boat, man. I think that do I use it? Bro, I catch myself every now and again, like talking to people I grew up with, or talking to someone who is from that community, and it'll slip up. But I catch myself, and I've gotten way better over the past, let's say, 10, 15 years or so. I grew up, that was like every other word. That's how we talked, where I grew up at. But I see it from an older mind now, and I'm looking at it like, dude, I know what the word means now, and I don't agree with it. I don't like the word. I would never use that word around my grandmother, I would never do that. And it's just that same rule applies. Like, dude, my kid's mom, she's Mexican, and she heard me use it a couple times, and she hated it. She hated it, man. Hated me for it. She's like, she never wanted to hear it again. My son is never allowed to say it. And it's one of those things, like you said, if you could snap your finger and it would go away, it's like, I've been watching a lot of documentaries and reading a lot of books on our history and how that word was used too, man. And it's just like, why would you want to use it? And I get how we took it, owned it. Now it's in pop culture, our music now. And, I think that it's kind of played out. Dude, my top 5, I got Eminem in there, and he's, he can go an entire song and never use the word, you know what I mean? So, but I honestly think the word should have never became popular like that. My opinion, and like it's just one of the reasons why I don't listen to rap like that anymore. Now it's just a lot of old school stuff, But no, I don't agree with the word. I think once you do start using it and it becomes like your everyday talk and the people you hang around, it gives them an excuse to use it. And then it grows and it grows and it grows. And then, like you said, Mike, it eventually gets around to the person who doesn't like that word, and then you have a fight break out. So personally, I think the word should be completely banned from being used by anyone. But would it happen? No, I don't like the word. No, I personally don't like the word. Have I slipped up and used it? I do, just like I used the F word and all types of other words, but I understand the derogatory meaning behind it, though.
Yeah. Do you guys see a disparity or, let's say you're in a situation where do you think that race, for you guys personally, does race play a role in how you respond to somebody using that word?
Does race play a role in how we respond? Bro, to be honest, as an honest person, yes. I mean, I've been called it with the ER, and I've been called it from a white guy with the A at the end. And then with the A, I'm just like, I don't know. How comfortable are you using that? I've never gotten into a fight over it. But a black guy saying it, that's just like, honestly, bro, it's how I grew up. That was like how we talked to each other. And that's just how people talked, Do I get offended? I would say, no, it doesn't depend on the race. A black person could call me the N-word in a derogatory manner. I would get just as pissed if a white person used it, Disrespect is disrespect, but just nonchalantly using it. Yeah, I think race does have a factor in it, but from taking off these lenses and putting a white guy's lens on, I'm like, well, the argument of, well, dude, it's like in the title of a song, of a very popular song, how do you go ask for that song to be played from a DJ per se? Yeah, there's a song called N-Words in Paris. I mean, it's promoted by us. I don't know. It's a weird word, man. It's a weird word. I think that it should just be gone. I don't know. It's weird topic, But yeah, race would play a role in it. I would say, yeah. Especially as a white person, I think that if as a white person you know what that word used to mean and how it was used towards black people, why would you want to use it?
Yeah, you should have enough, common sense and emotional intelligence not to use it. I haven't, man. I can't even recall a time I've actually heard a white person say that to me. You know what I mean?
But in an instance where, let's say hypothetically that it did, do you think whoever's saying it's race plays a role in how you're
Absolutely,
responding?
100%. Because you know, now again, and context is key, right? Context is everything as well, right? So if it's a black person saying it, right? And usually like when I am around like people who do use that word, they're younger kids that I mentor, right? So I have a conversation with them because I know that they don't understand. They're a child. They don't understand the history behind that word. So obviously I'm not going to get offended. Now, I don't really work much around suburban areas, right? I work in inner cities around black kids, and Hispanic kids are mixed between half black and half Hispanic kids, and they use those words, and I have conversations with them. White person knows better. A grown white person knows better, right? So that's why it's a big difference, you know? So I mean, as an adult, I don't have any black friends that use that word on a consistent basis to take offense. But yeah, if a white person did it, yeah, definitely.
So, you know, again, in the interest of playing devil's advocate, right, is that while I understand all of the emotion behind it, I can tell you, you know, I'd say a fairly common white perspective would say, okay, so, you know, now you're treating somebody based on their race, right? And so, again, one could argue, what is the difference then between that and anything else where you're treating somebody differently based solely on their race?
Well, I mean, that's I think this is completely different. It's kind of like sports teams, right? You slap the dude on the butt, right? Mm-hmm. You're not gonna do that to a female, right? Like that's common. Like, hey, what's up, dude? Hey, what's up, dude? Right? You're not gonna do that to a cheerleader, right? Because there's a difference, right? The reality is, you know, you're a male, she's a female. It's inappropriate to go up to chicks and smack them on the back of the butt, right? It's you know that that word is different, just like that action is different in a sense. So I don't see it as. I see where you're going with this, but essentially what I'm saying is there's a difference.
No, I mean, for sure, I understand, you know, that as an analogy. Again, you know, in looking at it and trying to, you know, present a perspective where, you know, again, if people are saying, well, wait a minute, like, you know, and again, I think the frustrating response for most white men is that, you know, if there is an inconsistency, it's, well, that's different, or you should know better, or I don't give a fuck, or you have all these other things that are so easy, you know, that's the last thing you should be bitching about. Like, you don't have enough, you got to have that too. And you know, you hear that, I hear that, you know, a lot of white men hear things like that a lot. You know, and to me, again, like, I want to be as open and honest with you guys the same way I would want you to be the same way with me, of saying, you know, similarly, like, right, is that, you know, and I'll go back to the kneeling analogy, is that, you know, for somebody that again, even though we've been through this, right, of you know, we've put flags on coffins of guys that we respected with the utmost ability to respect somebody. You know, we've lost brothers hearing that anthem played at, you know, at certain cases. And while that may not bother us, for some people that have that type of you know, emotional response to that action, they may say, well, that's fucking different, you know, like, well, it's just protesting, I don't mean any disrespect. They may say, well, to me, that is fucking different, you know, because for everybody out there that says, yeah, it's not a big deal, there's somebody that says, no, motherfucker, you better know better than to do some shit like that. You know, there's some people that you could probably call their mom a whore and they wouldn't care. There's other people that are going to cave your head in for doing that, you know, even though to me, like, in both instances, it's like, that's my mom you're talking about, you should probably know better than that. But there's still some people that aren't going to care if you do that, and there's other people that will be offended to the point where they'll go to jail over it, you know.
And there's options though, right? So that the scenario as it relates to the kneeling of the flag, that person who takes offense to that, they have the option to keep watching or turn it off, right? And in the same sense, you know, there's, but the consequences are different, right? Like the consequences of a white person uses that word in a derogatory way or uses that word period is them getting knocked out. Those are two different consequences. You could just turn off the TV, walk away, and keep watching and go about your business, or you could get knocked out, lose your job, get put in a position where you're labeled in a negative way, right? So I think the consequences are different. Like, does that make sense?
Well, sort of, but to me, where the consequences are being doled out is different, though, right? Is that, because right, the perspective is you're offended by that, turn the TV off and walk away, right? Mm-hmm. So you could approach and use that same logic and reasoning as saying, if somebody calls you a word you don't like, you can turn around, ignore them, and walk away.
That's an option.
Right.
That's an option.
Right. So,
I'll ask, why would anyone want to use that word for that matter? Exactly. Why would anyone want to?
Yeah, no, agreed. But, again, just in the interest of rounding the perspective, some people may say, why would you ever kneel during the national anthem? Like that's sacrilege. That's the most, there's people that feel that way about it, just like there's people that don't care about, somebody using the N-word. There's some people that they're going to fight you over it. So, to me, like in looking at it from, trying to remove all bias, all emotion, be as objective as possible of saying, if I let something bother me to the point where I can't control my own actions, whether it's flag kneeling, whether it's racial slurs, whether it's assuming white privilege, whatever, like that may piss me off to the point where I want to punch a motherfucker that says, you've got white privilege. Like that may make me want to go grab them and put their fucking skull into the ground for assuming that I've had it easy. It may piss me off that much. And I can let them take control of my emotions and give me an inability to control my actions based on what they're doing, or I can ignore it and say, you know what, that's your fucking problem, and I'm not going to get involved in the consequences. My interest is in trying to be as consistent as possible with every interaction where there's not, well, that's okay because of this, or, well, we'll let that one slide because of X. And when you start...
It is to be consistent, yeah. I get it.
Right, but I think we live in a world where it's hard to be consistent.
Well, it's impossible.
It's impossible to be consistent.
But to me, all any of us can do is strive to be as consistent as possible. Mm-hmm. And again, I think when people lead by example, the same way where I don't like being called certain things or being assumed that I'm racist or that I have white privilege or any of the other things that bother me, that piss me off. What I'm not going to do, I'm not going to, go burn shit down. I'm not going to punch people in the face over it. I may be irritated by it. But, to me, if everybody takes that standard of, here's how we can work together in a common theme, is me understanding, there's certain things that really fucking piss you off when I do them. And so, I'm going to do my damnedest not to do them. Yeah. But that goes for everybody, right? Is that, if there's certain things that, hey, that really fucking pisses me off, well, then instead of me saying, who cares what you think, is that, we're
extending
all
the olive branch.
Yeah. All right. Just a couple other things I wanted to talk about, and then again, at any point, if there's anything, like I encourage and appreciate you guys asking me questions too. I've got all these questions listed, but I think it's it's important if there's anything you're like, I've always wondered, fucking whatever. Yeah.
Man, I wish I'd known I had all my questions ready.
Please do, but maybe we can do a 2.0 round. We can actually get Nick in person. But in that kind of same vein, the Black Lives Matter, that slogan, and what it means versus what the actual words are, I think are an important distinction. I'm curious to get your guys' take on Black Lives Matter as an organization / movement.
Yeah, see, I'm not too familiar with the organization. What I'm familiar with is more so the movement than the organization. And what I'm for is the movement. I have to get a little bit more read into the organization and understand it more, and its edicts more, and all the other areas that they're working in. I mean, some areas that we've already kind of touched on in this conversation outside of, the police brutality piece, like entertainment, education, so on and so forth. But I can't speak to the organization. I could just speak to the slogan, which is something, the slogan and the movement in and of itself. And I'm for that. I'm for that. I think that it's, it's important that we have something that emphasizes this point, which it has been emphasized in the past, but it's seems as though it's been forgotten, so to speak. You know, the fact that Black lives do matter. So that's just my 2 cents there. I would have to get more read into the organization before I, can answer in an intelligent way.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the organization as a whole, just the movement, what they stand for, and what I'm getting out of the entire movement is not just like specifically only Black people. It's about equality for, everyone, but it's because of the what happened to, in Minneapolis. It was like the straw that broke the camel's back. But as far as being what that movement or what that organization is, I don't know. I just know that it's about, equality for all. I don't get the whole just it's only about Black people, because I didn't see only Black people out supporting or holding up those signs. It was everybody. So I personally don't think that it's just all about Black people, though. I don't think it's just only Black people. It's, it would be kind of course, everybody matters. To me, I think everybody does matter. It's not just, only Black lives matter and no one else. I think that whoever took that narrative and made it seem that way was,
Yeah, I hate that narrative. Yeah, it's been used to create division, a narrative that it's all that this is what they're saying. They're saying that only Black lives matter and that's it. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that in the past, it's been proven that Black lives don't matter, and what we're saying now is no, Black lives do matter. You know what I mean? So,
what is it? 1/5 of a man? What is it? I forget the percentage of what the Black life was valued at. Damn, I shouldn't forget that. It was like 1/5 or 1/3 or something like that of a man, quarter of a man or some shit like that. I forget what it was, man.
So, I mean, in the interest of just preparing to have a chat, I didn't spend hours looking at all of the different policies of Black Lives Matter, but trying to distinguish the difference between a movement, an organization, and a hashtag that all have the exact same 3 words in them. Where I think people are confused, A, and B, run into trouble is that it becomes very gray and blurry as to where the separation is, if there is one at all. And in looking at the Black Lives Matter website and from what I gathered, it was in response to Trayvon Martin being killed back in 2013. And it started out basically as a hashtag movement that turned into an organization that has now turned into a worldwide phenomenon and movement. Where I struggle with some of the things is some of their positions on certain topics, primarily the nuclear family and the dynamic of raising children is vastly different from what I believe. And I think from what most people believe, at least the ones that I know. But where I think it's tough, and I'll use an analogy on the other side of the token here in a second, is that when an organization has hundreds of millions of dollars and has that kind of clout and national and international reverence and clout and positional authority on a certain subject, is that no different than a politician. If a politician's mostly good, but there's a few different things where it's like, wow, that's pretty fucked up. To me, those are important things to know. If on social media, as an example, people hashtag something that they're not frankly that familiar with, and I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the virtue signal of, towing the line and doing what everybody else is doing, that essentially boils down to peacock feathers or running your fucking mouth and having no follow through, right? Is that's what most people do, is that, they are real quick to give a presence or a perception on social media that they are for something in a huge way and whatever. And just like they want you to think they're in really good shape by the filters they put on and the way that they arch their back, or the car that they rented for the weekend that they want to think that's in their garage that's not, is that it's a brochure, right? It's a 15% of bullshit of a brochure that people want you to think, is that's what most people's social justice mechanisms are, right? Is going on social media and telling everybody else how shitty they are and how good they are without doing anything actually to fucking back any of that up.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I saw a lot of blue check marks. They were using a hashtag, but I didn't see a lot of the people out there at the protest either to even try to understand. Just as the people who have a opinion about the Black Lives Matter movement, I didn't see too many people who's attended the marches or even had, taken the time to ask someone who's, been on the street of one of those marches. It's kind of, either I'm going to regurgitate what Fox News says or what CNN says. Yeah. And like I said, if you could find me 10 social media people who were out there at these protests, I'd be happy. But I can find you 1,000 who put up, all this information about, what their opinion was, but no one took the time to actually go interject themselves into the conversation. Or what they perceive to be the issue. I did, but
and to me, like that's a good first step. Ultimately, and this goes back to in the interest of trying to solve the problem, is that one of my favorite adages in all walks of life is that what you do speaks so loud I can't hear what you say. Right. And I think social media is a classic example of that, is that, you can have the biggest fucking mouthpiece in the world and talk all the shit you want. But if you're not joining a police force, if you're not, donating money to inner city programs to help education because you think that that's what's going to fucking make the difference. Like if you're not actually doing anything about it, then not only I don't give a shit what you say, but fuck you on top of that. Because to me, like that's the worst of both worlds, is that you're trying to let everybody else know how fucking righteous you are and how shitty they are without actually doing anything about it. And it's the celebrity that gets the picture, of him handing a bag of rice to the fucking, to the food bank or whatever. It's like, I want everybody to know that I'm helping and I'm doing my fucking part, but they're really not. And they're sowing, divisiveness on top of it because it's associated with a group that has some pretty controversial stuff that I think if most people knew.
What are a few of them? Like I don't know too much of the organization. I've also never used the hashtag, but I think that a lot of people do, go on what is trending. And with this being the case with the George Floyd, or all Black Lives Matter movement, just like today, I was watching the news and there was the Democratic Party had the African garment around their neck. How much do they really know about it, or how much do they really associate with that party? I think a lot of people do things, just to do it. But if there is something that, that needs to be changed or anything like that, let's say, for just using this example for, the protest or whatnot, everyone is talking about the riots and everyone's talking about the looting and all this and that. Well, when was the last major event that has happened? We've had a complete silence and all of that for a little while now, and that's still the only talking point, are about the violence and the looting and all that. But then just today or yesterday, a KKK member tried to run some people down and ended up shooting someone, during one of these protests. I don't know. I think that there is a lot of lip service, and there's a lot of opinion of what people may think or perceive to be about what this movement is about or whatnot. But until the people actually get out, maybe ask someone. I don't know anybody who's on the board. If there is a board of all Black Lives Matter, I don't know anyone from that. I've never met them, never seen them, never talked to them. I also know that there's people in the NAACP who are high up positions who ended up not even being black. So I take what those organizations, when they represent or claim to represent an entire demographic, with a grain of salt. I don't know these people, never heard of them. I know what I see on the ground, and I know what I see out in the street, and it's never what the news is displaying. So I think that if we're relying on CNN, Fox News, or whatever MSNBC news that we watch, I mean, it's a very, 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 very small lens we're looking through. But until we become a part of it, if there wants to be change about anything, I think the first step would be to, maybe understand it by becoming a part of it. That's what I think. There is a lot of public opinion about what this movement is about, but I said, how many of these people have been on the street? It's a different conversation.
And I think the heart of each person is different, right? You know, like you might have some people who, you know, they're so rooted within the organization that, again, I don't know 100% what their mission statement is. So they abide 110% by that mission statement. Then you, on the other end of the spectrum, you'll probably get people like myself and Nick, who, you know, we're black men and we're just like, hey, you know what? We believe in this movement called Black Lives Matter. We're for it. We want to see a change in our communities, not just as it relates to policing, but as it relates to education and other things. And that's how we're moving under that term of Black Lives Matter. So I think that there's different spectrums. We can't just take that one word and just group them all together, you know, as one.
Because that's the problem in the first place. It's that other side is saying, well, you guys are taking the bad apples of the police force and then grouping them all together. Wouldn't that be the same if you guys said, or that other side said that, well, Black Lives Matter is about this and people hashtag it? It's kind of generalizing a bunch of people in that same light as when people complain about, oh, well, not all cops are bad. You know, it's that same generalization of a group.
Yeah. And that's, you know, in the light of again, I don't know what their mission statement is, but that would be in the event that their mission statement was negative at some point, which I highly doubt it is, but in the case it was, then that would apply.
Yeah, I think you know, the analogy I wanted to use, you know, putting the shoe on the other foot is, and what I hate to see in both instances, right, is that, you know, there's been a concept that's been taken and has been, you know, politicized, in some ways distorted, in some ways politicized, and in some ways, you know, manufactured into something that is way beyond what its original intent was. And on the other side of the token, I would say a red hat that says "Make America Great Again" is the same exact scenario. Is that, you know, to say, hey, I'd like to make America great again. Well, who the fuck would argue with that, right? It's the same.
I would say the only argument would be, when was it great, though?
Exactly. That's what I was. Yeah. And that's the same notion that I've always had, you know. Okay.
Well, right. And so, you know, somebody on the other side may say, well, to me, right? Like to you, you may say, well, when was it ever great? You know, to some people, they may say, when have Black lives not mattered? They've always mattered for
the 1960s, when they were getting lynched and there were laws in place to keep them oppressed. That was like the government conspired to keep black people down. Yeah.
Agreed. But I'm saying for each individual person, right? Like if we're saying collectively, yeah, that's very different. You know, on the same token as making America great again, it's like, well, when was it great? Well, for some people it has been, right?
Yeah, but not for all people.
Right. But
that word America, that word America is supposed to encapsulate all people, right? When we say make America great again, right? Because we're not saying make part of America great again. We're talking about the slogans make America great again. So I'm trying to figure out, when was America great for everybody, right? Not just a specific group of people, and that's the way it needs to be. I mean, at least in my opinion, I think that's the lens that it needs to be viewed by.
Mm-hmm. What were you going to say?
So that's if that would be, I guess that's a question. Would it be not just for you, but anyone, if, you know, listening, when was it great? And not just for a small demographic, but America as a whole. When was it great? Was it when it was established, or was it when there were slaves? You know, when was it actually great? Women didn't have rights, you know.
I'll give you my take on it, but first I just wanted my point with making that analogy is that you know, a concept, while, you know, in its infancy and in its original form, is now means something very, very different than what it was intended to mean, right?
But wasn't the first slogan of "Make America Great Again"? That was with Reagan, right? Or who was it? Nixon? One of those.
No, yeah. So with, you know, Reagan used it.
So it's not an original concept. It's the original concept would be whoever used it first. Black Lives Matter wasn't until 2013, and the original concept, from what I gather, was about, you know, I guess equality. I don't know too much about the, you know, all Black Lives Matter organization, but I do know that the slogan, where it derived from, and the president that it originally came from. And it wasn't like specifically for everybody.
So I guess, to your question, when do I think America, was ever great? To me, for me to have an opinion on when this country is great, when I haven't been a part of it, that to me, that's making an assumption. Can I say, well, I think it was great back then? Well, how the fuck would I know? When I look at my life as it relates to this country, and I try to look at it from the broad spectrum of the entire planet, of all the other places I've been to, do I think it's a great country? I do. Do I think it's great right now? I do. Do I think it has flaws and it could absolutely be improved upon? Fucking A, I do. I wouldn't be having this conversation with you gentlemen if I didn't. So that's how I look at it. Again, I always try to look at something of, I can focus on things that have happened to me or a bad hand that I've been dealt, or I can compare myself to everybody else. And I'm not saying that there aren't bitches and grievances that are worth having. I just look at it again. I try to teach my kids, and I try to look at it from my perspective of every day I get up, is that I can make a choice and focus on the things that I can control or not. To me, do I think that this is a great country? I do. I think our ability to have the conversations that we're having, to have the country in the context that it stands right now, I think is pretty special and amazing, or I don't think so many people would try to come here if it was such a shitty place. I would ask you guys the same question.
Yeah, I agree in part with that, because, first 5 years of my life was in Nigeria, right? And again, the reason why we had to leave Nigeria is because of the corruption and because of what happened to my father. And I get emails and I get DMs every week from at least 3 to 4 times every week from Nigerians saying, can you sponsor me into the United States? Can you help me get into the U.S. military? Like, I'm tired of being here. The corruption is overwhelming. So, from that perspective, having lived on one end of the pond, so to speak, and now being on this side, America is a lot better place to live in it's a much better place to live in than a lot of other places, in my opinion, especially some of the places that we've deployed to. Yeah. So from that perspective, I do believe that we have greater opportunities. We do get greater opportunities. There is freedom of speech here. There is the freedom to protest. You can shout down the president and call him names. You can't do that in other places. You do have the freedom to love who you want to love. You can't do that in Nigeria, right? And so from that perspective, I do believe that this is a much better place to live, and we have a lot better opportunities. But as far as like saying that America is great, like for me, that's a strong word to use. And I think that once it's great for everyone, then it's great. And that's my definition of greatness, right? Mm-hmm. My definition of greatness as
United States, it's united. It's supposed to be united, and for it to be great again, you'd have to first show me when it was great. As America, I'm just the quote being the quote it is. If we're taking it as verbatim as people take Black Lives Matter and take it as, well, all lives matter. Well, then my rebuttal to make America great again would be, well, when was it great? When was it great to begin with? When was the first time it ever was great? And if no one likes that analogy or that rebuttal, then you got to think hand in hand. And it's that broad spectrum of understanding and being open. No one should be able to get mad at me or anyone else for saying, well, when was America ever great again? And that person, doesn't expect me to say or get mad if someone says, well, all lives matter. It's a very, it's one of those things where it's weird, man. It's really weird, Yeah,
I mean, I guess that, that was the biggest point I was trying to make is that both of them on polar ends of the spectrum are equally as polarizing, I think, for a lot of people, not everybody.
There's I also think people use that "Make America Great Again" and that hat stuff to piss people off. I think what America has come to its true petty nature of, well, I'm just gonna do this because it's gonna piss people off. I think that's one of the reasons why Trump did get elected by the Electoral College, was because he has that I don't give a fuck attitude, and he's not scared to talk however he wants to talk on stage or amongst, a large crowd of people or on national television. And he doesn't care about it. And I think that he knows that pisses people off. And certain people like that. They like to get a reaction out of people because it's not in the box, and people like to rebel, and people like to say, well, I'm different, so I'm going to, be this way or say these things. And I just want to be, not go along with this trend. So I also think that's another reason why people just throw that out there with MAGA everything. I mean, if you can't explain when was it ever great, then how much do you really believe that slogan, other than you just use it because it's a trendy thing, and that's about it.
Well, and so, yeah, I think that on both sides, right, is that there's a lot of people that couldn't answer that, that would.
There's a lot of people who use hashtags just to use hashtags.
Yeah, and again, on both sides, they're like, fuck, I have no idea what it means. Just I saw everybody else doing it, and I feel like I need to do my part, and that's going to make a difference. And my take is, like, if you really want to make a difference, join the fucking police force. If you really want to make a difference, take the millions of dollars that you made on whatever fucking concert you held or movie that was a box office smash, or Wall Street investment that you fucked the rest of us over on, and donate some of that money where it's going to make a goddamn difference. Like that is what's going to change things. A fucking hashtag and virtue signaling on the internet's not going to do a fucking thing other than further divide a country that's already pretty fucking divided from the scene, from the looks of it. Yeah.
The United States, man. The United States.
Yeah. Or as Eminem calls it, the divided states of embarrassment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Talking to people overseas, man, and it's embarrassing. Yeah, it's embarrassing. I mean, dude, to be honest with you, I'm like in my 30s, and I'm not going to live to be 100. So, to be honest, man, this is my honest occult shit speaking, is like, none of us really matter anyways, and none of our opinions do. It's kind of selfish to think that these measly 76 years that we have on average live here in America because of poor health diets and stuff like that, we're almost halfway there. And that last 10, 20 years really doesn't fucking count anyways. You're not doing anything. So it's kind of selfish to even believe that, oh, wow, we really even do matter. We're already halfway there. So I think
I'm well past halfway, Nick. I wish I was as young as you.
What's that?
I said I'm well past halfway.
Hey,
I wish I was as young.
That's where I'm going. It's like, so I think that, I don't know, I go between these different things of thought where how important do we really think we are, that we matter so much that these measly 76 years relative to the entire grand scheme of time, that we really matter anyways. Any of our opinions, anything matters, Does anything really matter? We live 76 years on average, Does it really count? It's kind of selfish to think that my hate or my opinions should affect the entire world. Why would it,
Well, yeah, I mean, but the reality is that they do. You know, every one of us does matter, and everybody's opinion is valid. They're all going to be different, and
but time always wins, man. Time always wins.
Yeah.
But it's only relevant and matters for a certain period of time. No one remembers Tom Lewis. There's been a lot of Tom Lewises who died and probably had some really good ideas and positive vibes they put out there, but no one knows Tom Lewis.
I agree. I don't know who Tom Lewis is, but
me neither. I made him up, but I'm sure he existed somewhere, man. He was a good dude somewhere, but no one gave his impact was only it only affected the people who who saw him or who chose to listen and who carried that and started on. But yeah.
In the interest of keeping it in the positive lane, I know we talked about how we fixed it, and I think collectively. I think we've come up with some pretty good fucking steps forward that are both feasible, manageable, and things that could be done right now if people were willing to do them.
Yeah.
I would ask, for you guys, on top of what we've already talked about, which is accountability immediately for police, taking the funding from foreign aid and taking a several year or a specific amount of time pause before it's reassessed. Take all of that money and dump it into education and resources for our entire country's youth, in conjunction with everybody truly and generally trying to not dismiss anybody else's perspective, and say, look, mine's valid, but if I expect you to validate my perspective, I've got to be willing to validate yours also.
Yeah.
And then, doing on top of everything else is that, I don't give a fuck what you say. What are you doing to change things? And then last but certainly not least is that, focusing on the things that you can control, which is your house, your family, your kids, your community. Those are the things that you can impact right fucking now. And if everybody just says, you know what, I'm going to bury my face head first into those few intangibles that I can control and maximize, do the best I can, our whole country would be far better off. On top of that, is there anything you guys could add to that in terms of what you think we could do to help get us out of the turmoil that seems
broaden
like right
broaden our perspective, man. You look back at the Summer of Love, what they called it back in the late '60s. The Summer of Love, like it was like during the Woodstock time. That Summer of Love was also during the time of like segregation and the race war, the race riots, and black people getting abused by, cops and colored only and whites only. But it was also known, the Summer of Love. So broadening our perspective of, it may be fine and dandy for one demographic, may be a complete polar opposite, demonic end for someone else. Not saying that is applicable to me or anything. I haven't experienced racism to the fullest 10th degree, and the way my lifestyle is set up, dude, I'm not scared of death and I'm not scared of jail or prison. So that's how I roll through life, man. What's that?
So smoke them if you got them. Is that what you're saying?
Smoke him if you got him. Dude, there's an ice cream truck who's a pedophile. He's never come back through this. We don't even have ice cream trucks come through our neighborhood anymore. And a guy who tried to rob our neighborhood and my house, never happened again. Like, you're right, standing up for it starts small, and dude, yeah, it starts where you live,
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah, and I think I touched on this earlier today when we were in the truck, but I just it kind of falls along the lines of accountability, and it's tribal accountability. Like, we're gonna always have these tribes within this country, right? Mm-hmm. We're gonna have Democrats, we're gonna have Republicans, we're gonna have conservatives, we're gonna have liberals, we're gonna have Black Lives Matter, we're gonna have MAGA, we're gonna have that's not going to change. That's not going away anytime soon. But I think that one step towards unity is holding leadership within our tribe accountable. I think that a lot of disunity comes from one political group, one tribe watching their leader do something bad,
giving them a pass,
and seeing it but not seeing it. Right. Mm-hmm. But seeing another tribe's leader do something bad and being so quick and seeing absolutely no good in another tribe, but seeing no bad in their tribe.
Yeah.
I think that that's a huge step towards our unity is just being willing to see there is some good in the other side, whether there is some good in the other side and there is bad in your side, and I think that once as a nation, all of these tribes within this nation can see, I don't like that political group or I don't like that group, but you know what? This person did this good.
Yeah.
Or this person, maybe we should use that idea. Or maybe we should go down, right? Instead of being so beholden to your political affiliation or your political preference that you can see no bad in your side and no good in the other side.
And that it's that holding yourself to the same standard or holding, whatever it is, whether it's the individual all the way up to a national political party, is that you hold yourself to at least the same standard that you hold the other side to.
Yep.
And so to me, like in circling back and wrapping it up, what I see is really, that if I had to, pinpoint one thing, is it boils down to accountability. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the police, whether it's political groups, whether it's communities, neighborhoods, inside your own fucking household, right? Is that if I hold my own family members to a certain standard, I better at least fucking meet that, if not exceed it. And if everybody does that, you can't lose. So to me, that for anybody listening that says, well, fuck, what can I do about it? Like I'm, Joe Schmo, the whatever, person that. Just goes to work and picks up my lunchbox every day and whatever like that. That's what each and every one of us can do is hold ourselves accountable to the same standard that you would hold anybody else and not make excuses, when you fuck that up, when you own it. Listen to everybody else with the intent to understand, not just respond, and truly try to understand where everybody's coming from. Yep. Is there anything you guys want to talk about, bring up, or again any questions you have for me or anything that you'd like to get my take on?
Dude, I don't know. I'm good. I'm really loving gummy bears. You know what I mean? I love gummy bears, man. I'm good, man. I think that was a really, really good conversation. You know, I think it was fixed a few things. I think that this could be applied to like the higher levels of government, how we do different things. I think the government just takes things and makes them really fucking complicated. It's not that complicated. You know, with under 3 hours, we just solved 3 major things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that that's where it starts, man. I think that's where it starts. And may not have to agree on absolutely everything, may not have to come together on everything, but, you know, chipping away piece by piece, you know, that boulder didn't get under that rug overnight, you know? It's accumulated over time. So chipping away piece by piece, eventually it'll go away or, you know, fix itself eventually, man. So yeah, here was all good, brother.
Yeah, everything's awesome, man. I think we just need to. Conversation is powerful. Mm-hmm. I think if we can, you know, there's so many other platforms out there, but if other platforms out there can just start having these hard conversations, I think there's some people who are scared to have these conversations because of the specific base that they have. You know, they may have a base that leans one way or a base that leans another way, and they're like, well, if I have this conversation and I'm going to turn off 50% of my base, or you know, I'm going to lose my base in general because my base is X, Y, Z. But I think that more of these conversations need to be happen, and you know, some things are not going to be said properly. Some things are going to be said wrong. Some feelings are going to get hurt. But you know, at the end of the day, it's going to bring understanding, and understanding is the key. Is one of the key steps, in my opinion, towards unity. You don't have to agree.
To me, it's a necessary first step that without you're never going to move past that. You know, so I couldn't agree more. You know, and in that same vein, I appreciate the hell out of you guys coming on, because it's you know, again, these conversations aren't easy to have. Most people aren't fucking having them. You know, and to me, like there's nothing more than I want than to provide a platform for you guys, for anybody, you know, to talk about what they want to talk about, but for me to do my goddamnedest to try to understand where you're coming from on it. You know, I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't care and didn't want to understand, you know, what your guys' perspective is, especially given our commonality and background militarily. And so I think, you know, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come talk, and I'm looking forward to getting this episode released and letting people digest it, and hopefully giving everybody some more well-rounded perspective and some things to think about that maybe they didn't think about before. So I love both of you guys very much. Appreciate you coming on.
Same here, brother.
Yeah, same here, man. Much love.
We're almost halfway to the other side, man.
I'm past halfway, Nick. We talked about that. Yeah, I wish I was your age, but at any rate, thanks again, guys. Anything you want to shout out or plug or talk about that you guys got going on that you want to mention?
You go, Remy. I'm fine, brother, man.
Yeah, I'm good, brother. I'm good, man. Just, you know,
this conversation for me, bro, was just about this, man.
Yeah,
I'm good,
this.
man. I'm good.
Yeah.
This was more important.
Let's keep doing this, everybody. That's one thing I want to pump. Let's everybody keep having these conversations, these hard conversations, and not shouting each other down. Like, that's the one thing I want to promote. Yeah.
And anybody that you know, wants to get more involved in these types of conversations, hit any of us up. Have these guys on your podcast. You know, me, whatever you want to see, other people that would be willing to come have this type of conversation. Be happy to have anybody that's willing to do it. So, on that note, I would like to take a minute to thank Origin Labs. Jocko Fuel, the sponsor of the podcast, they've been a consummate supporter for a long time now. The Jocko Fuel stuff, he's got a ton of different products. Origin Labs does as well. They also make gis, boots, jeans that I'm actually wearing a pair right now. They do massage your ass. Great company, though. They really are. I mean, they go above and beyond, you know, doing it the right way. They make everything here in the United States. Extremely fucking supportive of veterans and veteran families. And just kind of bringing the industry back to the United States the way that it should be in all of what they do. It's a really remarkable company, and I'm humbled and honored to have their sponsorship and support. So Jocko Fuel, Origin Labs, kicking ass. Thanks to them as always.
I'd also like to say thank you to our other sponsor, Resilience Premium CBD. Resilience is excited to offer all Mic Drop listeners a 20% off discount on all products for 2 weeks from when this podcast is live using the discount code MicDrop at checkout. I'd also like to say that Resilience, a great company that works in conjunction with Trico CBD, and all military veterans and first responders receive 35% off, and that's always through the military and first responders program. You just have to sign up to get verified at resilientcbd.com/military and first responder discount. In terms of about Resilience, it's a premium CBD that I use. Again, it's works in conjunction with the Tricos brand. For the everyday athlete. It's www.resilientcbd.com. And Resilience was born when its founders, who are U.S. military veterans as well, personally experienced the effects and impact that CBD had on their own mental and physical obstacles. The focus was sharper, mental stress was calmed, fitness stamina was increased, and their bodies felt less pain and inflammation after super intense workouts. A lot of times, most times, people are able to either wean off entirely or significantly reduce pain management therapy. And this shared vision among the founders was that this incredible supplement had not only changed their life, but had the power to provide unbelievable benefits to family, friends, athletes, fellow veterans, and ultimately the entire fitness community. So big shout out to Resilience for their product, as well as, again, the Trico stuff, and we appreciate their support.
I want to appreciate everybody listening. These are touchy subjects for a lot of people, and there's a lot of emotion, and it's very real, and it's warranted and justified, on all sides. And so, I hope that you guys got what we got out of this. Really, really glad to have been a part of this, and I look forward to seeing how you guys receive and respond to it. So, thank you guys, and until next time, this is Mic Drop.